is the Tuesday, October 9th, Byram Hills Board of Education meeting. Welcome. We welcome all of you, and we want to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the meeting was called to order at 7:39 p.m. The board went into executive session, and we had 4 items that we spoke about. 3 are on the agenda that was distributed in advance. There was 1 additional item added, 3.1, which was legal matter, individual employee, 3.2, district matter, district revenue, 3.3, personnel matter, retired employee, and 3.4 was also personnel matter, retired employee. So with that, I ask if there are any comments from the public regarding any items that are not on the agenda. Okay, hearing none. I would ask for a motion to adopt tonight's agenda, including the revision for the additional executive session item.
So moved.
All in favor? Okay, motion carries. So we welcome all of you here tonight, and I think while most of you are here, we will get to that agenda item very soon, but we just have a few matters of business to take care of first. It shouldn't be too long, so we look forward to a discussion with you. First, we wanted to vote on our consent agenda for personnel, special services, and business. Do I have a motion to approve that consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right, well, it's my pleasure to note that we did something very meaningful and important on that consent agenda, including all the business that we typically do, but we have welcomed a new employee to Byram Hills, our new Assistant Superintendent for Business and Management Services, Kelly Siebert, who couldn't be with us tonight, but we've all met him and spent time with him and feel great about the fact that he's going to join our team and will be sitting up on this table. And we will miss Jim, who has been an incredible asset to us over the course of...
But the board said we could keep you.
Yes.
We're not.
I hope there'll be an appropriate time we really can talk a little
Yes.
bit more about what Jim has helped us and what he's meant to the district. But I guess suffice to say for now, you've really done a yeoman's service for us, Jim. We're very, very grateful for the work you've done for us.
I know. And we will definitely have an opportunity to do a more formal goodbye, but just remember that you can always come and sit in the audience and ask questions.
He's counting the days.
And for the record, because I hope your wife is watching, because she would like to see you in your retirement, so she might be watching with Bobcat TV. But, you know, as a new superintendent last year, not new to the district, one does not want to hear that one's business official is in absentia. So you really saved us last year and continue to do so this year, and I'm so grateful. And Jim thought he was coming for a month. So he's been here a year and a few months now, and I just want you to know personally and professionally how much I've appreciated you being here. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Susan doing triple time in her position as treasurer.
Yeah, you served us very well, and we've learned a lot from you, and we appreciate all of your impact. So with that, we go to item 9, which is unfinished business, and the first thing on the agenda is 9.1, enrollment update.
Yes, so this is the BEDS time of year, and that is our basic educational data systems reporting to the state of how many children are in school across the United States on a specific date. And our students at the time, we had an enrollment of 2,307 students, which actually is less than the number we had on the first day of school, attributed to student absences, sickness, whatnot. But interesting that we were only 12 students off of the demographer's report. Other than that, it's unremarkable information and just a report that we have to do every year.
Yep. I'm sure we'll have more discussion when it comes to budget season.
Yes,
in terms
we
of just
will.
thinking about enrollment and how that potentially impacts
Yeah.
the future of the district. Definitely a topic that is important, and actually a good segue to the next item, which is board goals, because that's one of our sub-board goals around thinking through enrollment and the impact that enrollment will have on services that we provide long-term, making sure that students at Byram Hills continue to get the same opportunities, whether the enrollment goes down or it doesn't go down. So with that, I would open up the discussion on board goals. I think where we left off last time is that we had added 1 sentence into one of our board goals just regarding the exploration of school start times and how early it is, and so that's something that we added. Other than that, I think everything else was kept the same. But Mike, you weren't here at the last meeting, so we just wanted an opportunity to make sure that you didn't have any additional comments, and then to the extent that nobody else has anything additional, we can go ahead and vote on the board
No,
goals?
I'm fine. I appreciated the dialogue around security as well, so. it's fine.
Right. Anybody else have any comments? Okay, otherwise, I guess I would ask for a motion to approve the board goals for 18-19.
A second.
All in favor? All right, we have our board goals. Motion carries. All right, so with that behind us, we go to 9.3, which is review of policies.
And I'll turn it over to
Yep.
Tim.
Yep. So we have 3 policies that the policy committee looked at. The first one is on student records. There were many policies that were impacted by the McKinney-Vento Homeless Student Act, and so this was one of those that was open for that reason. Also, we made some adjustments to it as per our new policy on volunteers in the district. And not a lot of remarkable changes, just some technical changes due to this impact of homeless students. So there's a few things you can see in the red line version. Policy committee feels that it's a decent policy and not much to it. It was revised in 2015, so there weren't a lot of changes. That's one. The second one is on school district records. This one was opened again, not because there were regulatory changes, but because of the concern about data privacy. So NYSBA has been going through policies and looking where data privacy is important and just making sure that those policies emphasize data privacy. So there was just 2 lines where we tweaked information regarding that to make sure that the board recognizes and will assure data privacy for students. And that's what that policy has to do with. And then the third one is a regulation around school district records. This one was also opened up because of data privacy. We wanted to make some tweaks, but then there were some, I think this was over 10 years since it had been updated. So some of the procedures were outdated, including an email that went to nowhere. So checking with Susan, it was her email address, so we made it more generic and made the policy more applicable to our processes that are currently in place around school district records.
Okay,
That's
so
mainly it. So the policy committee recommends these for the board.
ask for a motion to approve the first read of these 3 policies. Does anybody have any questions, comments before we?
I think they're easier to read now. I think the changes that you made after the policy meeting on the 11/20 is good, makes it easier to read, so.
Yeah.
Good.
Anyone else? I thought they were also very clear and good work by the policy committee. So,
Thank you.
Policy committee this year, thank you.
okay, all in favor? All right, we're done for the first read.
Good.
So with that, we move on to new business, 10.1. First order of business is our external audit report, and we would invite our auditor from Naraki Smith to come and give a brief presentation. And I would just add for the public that we met as an audit committee. It's a committee of the whole, and we had a discussion and had an opportunity to ask questions and have useful dialogue. Because this is important work, one of the most important things that we do in a year, looking at our books and records. And with that, I turn it over to you to give us a synopsis.
Great, thank you. Good evening, my name is Christopher Angata. I'm with the firm Naraki Smith. I'm a manager in the firm. This evening I'm here to present the results of our 2018 fiscal audit of the district. Briefly, just to confirm the scope of our audit, we performed an audit of the general purpose financial statements of the district for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2018, in accordance with the U.S. Generally Accepted Auditing Standards and Government Auditing Standards. We also conducted an audit of the district's extra classroom activity funds, which are on the cash basis of accounting. With regards to the conduct of the audit, I just want to commend the district finance office, both Jim and Susan, on their excellent work. During the audit, we received excellent cooperation, and all of our records and requests were attended to pretty much immediately. With regards to the financial statements, there are 3 auditor's reports, all of which are clean or unmodified opinions, meaning that there are no material misstatements in the financial statements. As far as the financial position of the district is overall in a good financial position. There was a positive change in fund balance in the general fund for the current year. The district was also within the allowable fund balance limitations. That's the 4% set by New York State requirements. Capital assets of the district, net of depreciation, were $71.7 million for the year. And bonds payable reflected current year payments of about $5.1 million. There was an increase in real property taxes as well as state sources or state aid. And there was an implementation this year of a Governmental Accounting Standards Board statement number 75 with regards to other post-employment benefits. Essentially, that obligation is now fully on the district's full accrual statements. That obligation is to the tune of about $144 million. And just to kind of wrap up, we had no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses to cite the district on this year, and we had no current year recommendations. It really speaks to the overall governance by the board and by management as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board or community may have this evening.
So thank you for your work. We much appreciate it, and we talked about this in committee, but just maybe to maybe say that you got full, to ask the question, did you get full cooperation when you were doing the audit, and obviously it was a very clean opinion, but anything else that you think is material that you need to share?
No, all our opinions were clean. We received excellent cooperation from the district, from all the employees we encountered throughout the course of our audit. We don't just speak with, with the assistant superintendent and the treasurer. We speak with multiple people throughout the district. So we received excellent cooperation from everyone that we've spoken to and had requests from, and it was an absolute pleasure working with the district this year once again.
And you highlighted it in your comments, but the GASB 75, which is the OPEB accounting pronouncement that changed the way that we're accruing liabilities, was probably one of the more material changes to our financial statements and presumably every school district's financial statements across the state.
Correct, yes. So GASB 75 superseded GASB 45, which was with regards to other post-employment benefits of the district. Essentially, the entire obligation of the other post-employment benefits of the district are now on the district's financial statements. So it was the biggest and most material change to the district's financial statements this year. Outside of that, there were no material changes or anything to really note.
Does anybody else have any questions? Or? All right. Well, we appreciate you coming, and we appreciate your work.
Yes, thank you.
And we look forward to continuing the dialogue. And Jim and Susan deserve really an amazing amount of gratitude for working with our audit partner and for an amazing result. We can all be very proud of.
I would like to recognize Susan in particular. She does a tremendous amount of work, not just during the audit period, but all year long. And the business office staff, they're top notch. They have a lot of experience, and to get an audit with no current year recommendations and no deficiencies is just outstanding. So Susan deserves a tremendous amount of credit.
Yes, she does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you, Chris.
Safe travels.
Now get home safe.
All right, so with that, we move to item 10.2, vetting process. So just to give a very brief background, because I'm going to turn it over to our superintendent, Jen Lamia. The board received a request back in January 2018 from Matthew Gable, class of 71, proposing that the high school theater be named after a former teacher at Byram Hills, Gene Bissell. And since that time, there's been really an outpouring of support, and it's been a pleasure and truly inspirational to read many of the correspondences that we've received around the impact that Gene Bissell had on so many students at Byram Hills. Last year, when we first received this, it has been many, and I mean many years since the district has really contemplated a naming or moved forward with the naming of this magnitude. And the policy that we had around naming was quite dated, and so we went through a process of revamping that policy and coming up with a set of vetting criteria that then went through the policy committee, and we all were comfortable with. And with that really in place, towards the end of last year, moved forward with the process of vetting, which the board agreed made sense for this particular matter. And that kind of brings us to tonight. And what I would suggest for tonight, and I'm sure many of you are here to potentially say some words, which is great because we're happy to listen. I would first turn it over to our superintendent to give us a synopsis of the vetting process that she's undergone now over the past several months. And then with that, obviously, all board members can ask questions of superintendent. And then I would say that, from a process perspective, it probably makes sense to have anybody that would like to have a turn to speak. And before we do, I'll just go over the guidance for public input, and then the board can continue the discussion and just talk in terms of how we want to move going forward. So let me just ask my fellow board members any other either suggestions or questions, and if not, then I would turn it over to superintendent.
Let's go.
All right.
Well, first, welcome back, graduates. Right? Nice to have our alumni here. I have many events I could invite you to, and I'm really glad to do so. So thank you for coming here. This does say so much about our history at Byram Hills. It says a lot about a teacher's dedication to students and students' dedication to their teachers. So the teacher in me, is so happy to see you. So the board is conducting this vetting process in our public session. The history, a little bit of the history, is that, as Scott said, the board did receive an open letter in January from Matt Gable, class of 1971. He was proposing that the high school theater be named after his former teacher, Gene Bissell. Gene Bissell worked in Byram Hills as a teacher and a theater director from 1968 to 1987. And he was selected, actually, by the Theater Hall of Fame in Byram Hills High School in 2017. His picture's not up right now because we're redoing the theater, but the proposal included the names of about 46 alumni who wanted to be listed in support of the proposal. There were also some theater reviews, which were really fun for me to read as a school historian, and newspaper editorials. Following that, over 30 emails were received by the board president describing Mr. Bissell's impact on students' lives growing up on the Byram Hills stage. Mr. Gable communicated with the board or the superintendent over a dozen times since then, as you can imagine, because you've all been communicating with him as well, right? With additional information for our review and copies of testimonials and artifacts. And as we know, Policy 7500 was examined closely. It had not been reviewed in close to a decade. The policy committee and the board completed those steps and also collaborated on a vetting process. The vetting process is the charge of the superintendent and includes the following: a personnel file review, which was conducted in August in the executive session of the board, as we are permitted to do for employees. Also included in the vetting process is the impact of the individual on the student body, the district, the community, and/or the greater society, the relevance and impact of the individual's contribution to our current students and/or community, and any benefit to the current student body or community to name the facility after Gene Bissell. So first I looked at the impact of the individual on the student body, district, community, and greater society at the time Gene Bissell was here. It's clear from emails and letters from approximately 30 former students that Gene Bissell had a great impact on their lives growing up on the Byram Hills stage. The community and the district have benefited from the dedication of Mr. Bissell and many others to that program. I enclosed for the board, and the board has had the opportunity to read this packet since last week, the letters from numerous alumni. There were also testimonials. Matt Gable's theater naming proposal information talking sheets was helpful for me with testimonials. Matt Gable had reasons to name the theater after Gene P. Bissell. The first reason was Gene Bissell was an extraordinary music and choir teacher, theater director, mentor, and friend to students and the community of Byram Hills for nearly 20 years. He had an outsized transformational impact on so many students. In short, he was a once-in-a-generation beloved teacher. I saw nodding, that was nice. During his Byram Hills High School tenure, he created a joyful love of music and the theater among his students and district families. Through his boundless energy and pursuit of perfection, he also motivated students to achieve the highest standards of excellence, helped them find their voices within and beyond the stage, and became an enduring inspiration to all of them. Teamwork, tenacity, creativity, self-discipline, hard work, resilience, and never settling for good enough were his touchstones, and became invaluable lifelong lessons for the adolescents then and the adults they are now. Before diversity, inclusion, and safe space were part of the lexicon, Mr. Bissell made everyone feel as if he or she belonged by seeking out and binding together a wide variety of students, irrespective of gender, orientation, ethnic or socioeconomic background, academic record, or social clique. He created a welcoming social framework for all. As a result, his students experienced extraordinary camaraderie and mutual support, and many of those friendships have endured for 40 to 50 years. Mr. Bissell died in 2012. This fall will mark exactly 50 years since he began his tenure at Byram Hills High School. It would be fitting tribute to him and the many hundreds of students he inspired, and a great benefit to the school district to name the theater in his honor. In addition to those testimonials, on February 17th, the Board of Ed recalls that we heard from Richard Deutsch, Grant Sturriali, and Bill Mulvaney, who came to describe the impact that Jean Bissell had had on their lives. In addition to letters and testimonials, I also conducted interviews, some on the phone and some in person. There was substantial information to justify the impact of Mr. Bissell on his students from these interviews. In order to better understand the relevance, impact, and benefit to our current students, I asked the interviewees to provide me with information that might help me answer that question. There were 7 interviews that were conducted, and the board has the names of everyone who was interviewed by phone or in person, and people I contacted but did not receive a call back from as well. So in answering the most important question to me as a superintendent, the relevance, impact, and benefit of the contributions to current students in the community, I received the following. Current students and the school community benefit from a robust theater program today that had its inception during Mr. Bissell's tenure. The program continued to grow under the leadership of Joy Varley and then under the tenure of Deepak Marwa. Under their direction, Byram Hills has continued to have dedicated and outstanding theater directors for the past 2 decades, such as Adam Shatra and John Lopez. Peter Gallagher, in a letter to the Board of Ed, said, quote, "The value of naming the theater after Mr. Bissell, a name that fewer and fewer will know firsthand, is that it will create an awareness that some history and magic has happened there before. In addition, there is also the lasting recognition and responsibility that you're part of a continuum dedicated to telling a story so well you might change the world a little, even if it's just your world." Another student, Susan Sutton, indicated, quote, "Jean's productions literally put the school on the map." Bill Mulvaney stated, "Byram Hills students, faculty, and administrators alike should know that they have history and tradition, unlike most public schools, and akin to other institutions." Lisa Han Takahashi said, "Byram Hills is a small school. Jean Bissell's passion supported students to go on to be renowned professionals, such as Peter Gallagher and Laura Brannigan. This naming will show current students that you can achieve a lot coming from a small school, and perhaps it will inspire them." Matthew Gable said, "Generations, as I said before diversity, inclusion, and safe space became part of our lexicon, he sought out and bound together this wide variety of students." Mr. Gable also outlined what he called the long-term benefits of naming honors in an attachment to a letter he wrote to community members. He said that this naming would enhance the school's reputation. Byram Hills is known for outstanding music and music theater, which has created and nurtured for generations by Jean Bissell. This distinguished tradition of excellence is as fine as that of any private institution in the region. Accordingly, this reputation would be further enhanced by naming the theater after him. Mr. Gable said it would reinforce the qualities that Mr. Bissell stood for in building character, standing for tolerance, and reaching for the highest standards. He said it would strengthen ties with longtime alums. It did bring you all here tonight, I'm happy to see. And expand their extensive national network. Illustrative of this strong network is the robust, enthusiastic response by many stage alums to support naming the theater. If approved, the naming proposal will only increase and enhance the network and pride these alums have in Byram Hills High School. And lastly, he said, it will create a sense of historical identity and legacy that will reinforce loyalty, school spirit, and the attractiveness of Byram Hills to current and future residents, students and teachers, and even individuals or entities seeking an association or partnership with the school. in addition to what was stated here in the report, the board was also provided with the proposal, with all of the emails from the alumni. It was quite a thick board packet this week. Theater reviews, newspaper editorials, and all communications regarding the proposal. The role of the superintendent, as indicated in the policy, is just to provide a report to the board on the findings of the vetting process. So I now turn this over for our board to discuss regarding the open letter, and I hope the public can appreciate and understand that there were volumes of information for the board to peruse over the weekend before having this discussion.
So I know we have much of the materials in advance, but does anybody have any questions about what the superintendent went through before we open it up for public comments?
I have two questions. One is, what is the auditorium used for? Is it only used for plays and theater productions?
It's used for theater productions, for music productions, for classes, for great activities board, for, I mean,
Board
it's,
assemblies?
it's really-
it's
a
assemblies.
Multi-purpose.
It's a multi-purpose room,
Also,
yeah.
the high school, I would say, plus the greater community, it's where assorted honors take place, achievements.
Right. Science
Scholastic,
research.
Athletic achievements,
The honors
everything.
award, the end of the year honors, the junior and senior honors award takes place there.
So that leads me into my second question is, aside from naming a building or part thereof, are there any other types of naming avenues that would truly honor an individual, where an individual honored would be memorialized through a background statement about that person? Like, I don't know who H.C. Crittenden is. I took his picture off the wall and had to look at the back to find out who he was. My children have gone to school there. I do know who Abe Shaheen is because I've gone to the Science Research Awards Assembly every year, and every year they say he was one of the first graduates, and they give a whole speech about his passion and about what he brought to the program and why he was so important. So I know who Abe Shaheen is. I don't know who Harold Crittenden is. So I'm just wondering if there's a naming opportunity that will really bring to light what Peter Gallagher was saying and what everyone's been saying, where people will really know who this person is. I think when you slap a name on something, I've walked through so many buildings at college, I don't know who these people were. So I want him
So
memorialized the way that they
the
want
answer
him
to that
memorialized.
question is there have been other ways that we have done that. I don't know, I mean, I know that the board has all been, but I don't know if our alumni have been through the, and this isn't a question and answer, so I don't mean to bring it that way, but we have the Athletic Hall of Fame now, we have the Theater Wall of Honors, and those have been two ways that we've not only tapped students, but also former educators in the district, and really, you know, given them, posted their records, posted their histories. Other than that, it's really just been through scholarships. I mean, I know who High Blatt is, not because of my 30 years in the district, but because of the High Blatt Award. Right, and so that's where I have heard of the history of others. Like you, I did not know until probably a handful of years ago who Harold Crittenden was either, and I worked in that building for 14 years. But I did know that his history was behind his picture, which was helpful to all of us when we went there for a board visit.
Thank you.
Like, my recommendation is maybe we could hear from the public and then have
Yep.
a discussion.
That makes-
Because we may have some things to say based on what we hear.
Makes sense. So by a show of hands, just who would like an opportunity to speak tonight? Okay. Feel free to come forward. And while you're coming forward, I'm just going to quickly go through the guidelines that we have for public input. Once you're recognized by the board president, which I'm recognizing you now very happily, then you have the opportunity to present. We ask that you present in a 3-minute time frame or less, just to make sure that everybody has a chance, and then we have ample time for discussion as well as the other matters that we have before us tonight. If you can just identify yourself by your name and your address, and if you're representing an organization, that would be very helpful. And then you can direct comments to me as president, and then obviously if any of my fellow board members have anything that they would like to add, then just let me know, and then we can move forward that way. With that, I turn it over to you, and we welcome you tonight.
Hi, my name is Beth Cohen, and I'm here speaking about having the theater named after Jean Bissell, along with a lot of these other fine folk. I'm from class of '80, and I live currently in Irvington, but I grew up in Armonk. I went from Coman Hill to Crittenden to all the way through Byram Hills. I'm here mostly to speak on behalf of people who actually can't be here. I'm going to be reading some statements from different individuals. So I don't drone on, I'll read one, let somebody else speak, and then
Sure.
if that's all right with you.
Of course.
Some of you might know my mom as well, Jane Cohen, who's very much in support of this. She's the individual who actually threw his retirement party along with Anita Helmrich. So just to really quickly open, when Matt first conceived of this idea, he had, those 47 people that came forward. And what I'd like to let you know is that as of tonight, when I closed my computer and came here, we now have over 400 individuals who are in support. And here with us this evening, we have faculty members, we have people who are members of the community who weren't directly students of his, as well as alums, and it's a pretty broad network of people. So the first person I'm going to speak on behalf of is going to be Jerry Mariano. Some of you may know her from the community. She's another individual who grew up here. She was class of '85. And her statement is as follows. She's sorry she can't be here tonight. She was unwell. Many venues are attributed to iconic players or entertainers as being built by. As such, the Byram Hill stage was built by the late Gene P. Bissell. Productions from that time to the present day are high-quality, renowned events because of the theater program that Mr. Bissell began. All succeeding productions were built on the foundation that he built. Quite simply, a Bissell musical or play was an event growing up and attending school that I have wonderful memories of watching my sister in The Miracle Worker and friends in many musicals and plays. I have lived in the Byram Hills district since the age of 5 and have enjoyed productions under each director since. Yet Mr. Bissell was the first, and I am disheartened that more was not done to honor his legacy when he retired. And I believe it is never too late to give recognition to one who created a lasting program of greatness. Though long overdue, it is my hope that the board will vote to honor Mr. Bissell. And thank you for your thoughtful consideration. So that's from Jerry. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Mom's a lovely lady. I've known her for
Thank
quite a
you.
while.
She wishes she could be here, but she is
Yeah,
a few states away.
Welcome.
Thank you. Board President Levy, school board members, and Superintendent Lamia, guests. My name is Tom Patalik. My wife Ann and I have lived in Armonk for 55 years, and we reside at 3 Laurel Hill Place. Ann and I have 3 children, all attended the Byram Hill schools, K through 12. They have different personalities, think strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate. All molded by teachers at Byram Hills, some great and some outstanding teachers. Ann and I attributed their successful careers in no small way to the teachers at Byram Hills, who provided the solid foundation for their successful careers in business, medicine, and education. I grew up in the Bronx and had the privilege of attending the Bronx High School of Science, and was fortunate to have some outstanding teachers who prepared me well for a career as a New York State professional engineer, and subsequently I had my own consulting firm. Mrs. Rosa Carlin taught German in the form of what we call language immersion. It left such an impression on me that some 40 years later, this language capability enabled me to close a contract with a German-American company with annual extensions for 23 years. So I get it when people talk about teachers who had a significant impact on their careers. Earlier this year, a proposal was presented to the board to rename the Byram Hills High School Theater the Gene P. Bissell Theater. Support for this proposal came primarily from students who had the good fortune to perform on stage in one or more Bissell stage productions. I saw many of these productions, starting with 110 in the Shade. Invariably, I came away from these performances awed and amazed that these teenagers could project so well and bring out such emotions for the audience. The North Castle News, a wonderful local paper of that time, used superlatives in their reviews. Quote, another bumper crop of Roman candles. Quote, Arabia had its Lawrence, Stratford had its Bard, and Byram Hills has its Bissell. It's amazing. Standing ovations were the norm for each performance and the talk of the town for days afterward. Gene Bissell was able to strike the right chord in the players, able to bring out the best in them. He truly was an exceptional teacher. He set the standard for excellence for actors on stage. More than a half dozen players went on to professional careers in the theater. Even more important, the majority of his students found their life's work led elsewhere, yet they all identify the Bissell experience as a major transformative influence in developing their character, work ethic, focus, and interpersonal skills that serve them so well in their successful lives and careers as adults. I should add that I proudly served on the Byram Hills Board of Education 1982 to 1987, so I certainly have a rough idea of the magnitude and complexity of your decision regarding this proposal. I may add that John Heimerdegger, an Armonk resident since 1956 and a school board member 65 to 70, also supports this proposal. He is unable to attend this meeting tonight because of a serious fall that he had a few weeks ago. As someone who long ago faced key decisions as a board member, I fully understand that permanent naming, such as the one being proposed, must be made thoughtfully and with great care. That is why you have a dedicated naming policy in place, detailed, specific criteria, and a comprehensive vetting process to ensure adequate community input about such an important decision. But on balance, given all that I know about those who witnessed Gene Bissell and his transformative impact on the Byram Hills students and community, this naming decision is not only the right thing to do, it's long overdue. One more paragraph. It is rare that such an outpouring of appreciation is acknowledged by so many for one teacher, especially more than 30 years since a teacher retired and 50 years after he started teaching at Byram Hills. For those who performed so admirably, and those in the Armonk community who watched these unbelievable performances, and those students who are currently reaching for the Bissell standard of excellence, and those who will in future classes of Byram Hills do so, I believe there's no better way to honor Gene Bissell than to rename the Byram Hills High School Theater the Gene P. Bissell Theater. I strongly recommend the school board vote yes on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's amazing that to meet a former board member, so
Yes.
we appreciate you coming.
Okay, now I'm speaking as Frank Scheckman, who is class of '74. I'm a 1974 Byram Hills graduate and a 27-year resident of the community, just since returning here after medical school and residency. Both my sons are Byram Hills grads, and I play a leadership role in my class of '74. My extended family represents over 70 years of community service as physicians, school volunteers, coaches, and of course, taxpayers. Today we have a group of current district residents, alums, and former teachers numbering more than 300, which it's now actually more than 400, spanning Byram Hills graduating classes from '68 to '93, all of whom support the Gene P. Bissell naming initiative for the newly renovated theater. The number of supporters has grown quickly day by day, once word of our efforts started spreading by word of mouth over the last few months. Our fellow supporters represent an incredibly diverse group, including not only noteworthy theater professionals, but more importantly, doctors, teachers, architects, engineers, attorneys, business people, and community leaders, to name just a few. Many supporters never even had Mr. Bissell directly as a teacher, but witnessed his productions or crossed paths with him during middle school. It is noteworthy that his grassroots effort to name the theater reaches back 35, 50 years into our district's early history, and yet supporters are as passionate about it as ever. We have an obligation to recognize that Byram Hills High School is a relatively young school system with a small number of pioneers from its beginning, who established the district at the forefront of education and set the blueprint for where we are today. What's now often missing is a visible, tangible connection between past and present, and thus the bonds of an alumni network that could provide a wonderful resource to current and future members of the school and community. Naming recognition of those relatively few pioneers would inspire and lead to cross-generational participation in future school innovation and academic and cultural excellence and development. This would be a win for community, district, students, and alums. Who is Gene P. Bissell and why does he merit a naming initiative for theater? Quite simply, he set the standard for music and theater programs which still endures. Mr. Bissell practiced and projected a work ethic second to none, which not only had a long-term influence on the lives of his students, but also resulted in an incredibly high-caliber performance during his nearly 20 years at Byram Hills. A Bissell production was a hallmark event and a gathering point for the local community, as were his a cappella choir concerts during the holidays. Gene Bissell was totally dedicated to his students and set impossibly high standards. He was very supportive when necessary, but a true taskmaster when required. pushing us to be the best we could be. In retrospect, he actually taught us all how to succeed as adults. We have had 50 years to reflect on and assess the results and judge the lasting merits of this great man. In a school with exceptional faculty, he was truly extraordinary. And rather than ask, why should we name the theater in his honor, the question should really be, why should we not? And now, would you like to get up and say a couple of things?
I hadn't planned to speak, but I'm here. My name is Barbara Pizzuto Cody. I am a native Armunkian. I was born here. I didn't live here for 10 years, and I moved back 38 years ago and lived here for 35 years. My 2 daughters went through Byram Hills. I am in the first graduating class of Byram Hills. We just celebrated our 50th reunion. I moved away from Byram Hills 3 years ago to a retirement community in Connecticut. However, I still work at IBM in Armonk every day. I'm here because of my sister, who is 3 years younger than I am. As I graduated in '68, Mr. Bissell came. I did know Gene Bissell because he also ran a theater program at the YWCA in White Plains in the summer, and I was a lifeguard there. And so the young people who were around every night, I was hanging out with them. And so that's how I met Mr. Bissell, and was captured by his charisma. What he did, but I'm here to mostly speak for my sister, who's 3 years younger than me. She went to college and she became a teacher. She taught first grade in Hingham, Massachusetts for 35 years. She was Mr. Bissell's assistant director. And Mr. Bissell did so much for her and what the world became for her. She, every year, had at least 2 musicals with her students. She ran a summer musical program. She wrote a play and had a friend compose the music. And she will tell you to this day that this was all because of the inspiration of Gene Bissell. Someone mentioned Mr. Crittenden. Well, I knew it when it was North Castle School. And I remember the day it became Crittenden. We had Harold C. Crittenden Day in Armonk. We had a parade for Mr. Crittenden. He was my principal in elementary school, and he was larger than life. And I still remember him very, very fondly. I think probably one of the questions that came to my mind too is probably the question that you're dealing with is, well, what does it mean today? These kids don't know Gene Bissell. I think how it's important is that there are many places that are named that we really don't know the people they're named after. But I think of our forefathers in this country. We know what they stood for. And I think the education and the conveyance of what this man meant to so many students and how he inspired them and how some of them, like Peter Gallagher, were inspired enough to go on to do this professionally. I think that is the key, and that I am recommending highly that you name the theater. In fact, I was in there with our tour of the school, and it's great to see it being renovated. I too was in the theater program before Mr. Bissell was here, but I think to then convey to those students what this person was like, what it meant, and somehow do that. That is the key to this legacy going forward.
Thank you.
And I thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. And thank you for the history around H.C. Crittenden,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Barbara was my first babysitter.
There's a lot of history in this.
I babysat for them for more than 10 years, even in college.
Hi, my name is Dolly Colby. I was in the class of '69, and I was actually in Gene's first production of 110 in the Shade, and actually came back and worked with him as assistant choreographer for a few of the subsequent classes, including the summer stage. I'm actually here to speak on behalf of Valerie Keene from the class of '88 because she could not be here. Mr. B, you were the best. I had never had better. I don't know how you did it, but you inspired us into the pursuit of perfection and ultimate professionalism beyond our years, and we loved you for it. You took awkward, gangling teenagers and used their awkwardness to give life to characters. You once said to me, quote, "The greatest insult is if they say it was a great high school performance. High school performances are crap," unquote. Thank you for being honest. In that way, you certainly staged the hell out of a production. You knew that you didn't have actual actors in it. It gave us compass. It produced greatness. You treated and spoke to us like adults and expected us to act like adults. And consequently, we were responsible and professional at an early age. God, you spent so much time with us, one-on-one when we needed it, and you didn't have it to give. I have your copy of The Fantastics with your director's notes in it. It is one of my most cherished possessions, and I'm quoting from her script. It is September before the rainfall, a perfect time to be in love, a perfect time to cross into heaven. Cross on your upstage foot. Thank you, Mr. B. I sing for you.
Is there
Anybody else that would like to speak?
I hadn't planned on saying anything at all, but I do live in Armonk, and my kids did attend.
Can you just share your name?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No
My name
worries.
is Linda Sage.
Thank you.
Okay. And Ira had said to me, "What are you doing here?" And I guess I really
That's my
came
usual
to
warm
say-
welcome.
And I said, "You know what? I'm coming here, and I'm going to go at least tell you why I'm here." This is going to age me terribly, but actually Jean Bissell was my teacher when I was in middle school, Eastview Junior High. I was 13 years old. 60 years ago. Anyway, he went ahead and he had such an influence on me. I did not pursue theater, but he was amazing. And everybody who knew him then, we all felt he was a young man. He was going to go on to Broadway. And so when I moved to this school district, and I had a 2-year-old, and I looked at the Byram Hills letter, and I saw Jean Bissell, I went like, oh my God, could that be my Jean Bissell from middle school? And sure enough it was. And I attended all of the theater productions starting out when my first son was 2. So in terms of the community, what more support could I say that he had that effect on me, that I remember him 60 years later, enough to come here tonight too. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and now on behalf of Matt, who would love to be here, but is not. Everyone needs heroes, people to inspire, people to respect, people to follow because they lead. We look up to outstanding individuals who had an outsized influence on us. Gene P. Bissell was that person for so many of the students at Byram Hills High School over his long tenure. Gene P. Bissell was more than just a Pied Piper. He instilled character, integrity, honesty into his lessons and the theater program that he created. He made students believe in themselves so others could believe in them. He included people in activities who might have not otherwise felt welcome. He taught inclusion, he taught kindness, he provided opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody for sharing your comments. Much appreciated. So with that, I would open it up to board discussion.
Yeah, first I just wanted to thank everybody present and previously for your passionate and thorough, just your respectful approach to this request. It really gave us an inspiring journey through that time period and also got us to know a little bit about the beloved teacher and meet some incredible alumni. I hope you can see how we've taken your request very, very seriously and really to heart, and it's even caused us as a board to really reflect on what our role is in naming, and even, of course, as Scott had said, to revise our policy on it. And I was pleased to see that even before this request came in, that Jean Bissell was honored in the Theater Hall of Honor. This request came to us with really just one specific outcome. We wanted to name the theater after him, and this was not even something the board was even considering naming any facility, let alone the theater. You know, as we said, the theater is the pulse of our high school and really our community across a multitude of areas, including performance art. You know, the board trustees were ever changing, right? But one thing that's constant for our Board of Ed is really building on the past and fortifying our present and really planning smartly for the future. And sort of what we do today is a springboard for future generations, as our predecessors have done for us. And certainly Jean Bissell is one of those important predecessors. While he was clearly one of the important predecessors, you know, there have been many in many areas that rise to that level. So how do we, as a board, stop time and really say that this was the most important contribution to this district? You know, naming a facility says that we think that that time, that place, and that person's contribution is more important to our school community, past, present, and future, than any other. So that's what weighs on my mind as we're making this decision.
Sure.
Like many of you, I've been around a long time. For those who don't know me, here's my name, I think. Yeah, okay, it's the right name. I've been on this Board of Education for 20 years. I've been living in this town for 32. So I've seen a lot of changes in Armonk. When I came here, Jean Bissell had just about left. we sort of crossed paths. But I remember walking out of the theater in 1993 after watching the performance of Amadeus, when a young David Harbour played the role of Salieri, which to this day remains the greatest performance I've ever seen by a high school actor. I know it's years after Jean, but it shows what had developed and what continues. And as our superintendent said, you know, the ball was far from dropped when Jean left. We've had a succession of terrific leaders in the department, Joy and Deepak and Adam, just to name a few. They've been just fantastic what we've done. You have to, from my viewpoint, I'm just talking for myself at the moment, I don't for a moment, and I mean this sincerely, doubt the incredible impact that Jean Bissell had. I mean, what could bring people out to talk about this other than a man who had an incredible impact on people? And not just from what you've said, but from others, from the emails. So clearly this was a special guy. What I'm wrestling with in part, and I think it's important to be candid with the community, I try to be, is the whole concept of naming. I don't know if I'm all that crazy about. I don't know if the school district should be in the business of naming buildings and naming theaters after people. I mean, once you do it, that's it, it's done. You can't unname something. I was not, this building we're in was named after a former superintendent. Great guy, great superintendent. I'm not so sure that was the right decision either. There are many ways to honor, to celebrate career of someone. It's an obvious thought to say name the theater after him. But this is a tough issue for me because of the whole concept of naming. It's easy to say just do it. He was a great guy. Look at all the impact he had. Look at all the people who he touched. I understand that, and I guess perhaps if there's an issue here, it's that it's been so many years since Jean's been here. That doesn't mean what he did doesn't still reflect, but it means that for us, it's an issue we have, that so many years have passed since Jean left the district, that our ability to properly weigh and analyze the real impact he had has to be, it becomes somewhat secondhand. It's nobody's fault, it's just how the issue came to the board. I know you all want us to say, yes, we're going to name it after him, and that's the end of it. But for someone like me who's had so many years in this district and has lived and has raised my children here and just I treasure this public school district, I need to make sure this is the right decision and that this really will advance the values of our policy, will advance the values of the district before we go ahead and do this, or maybe we decide on doing something else. I know in many of your eyes, it's easy. It's always easy when you're not raising your hand to take a vote on it. It's not easy for me. I wish it was easy. I wish it was easier, but I'm telling you, I'm struggling with this decision. And it's not for any reason for a lack of respect for Jean Bissell. And if anybody thinks that's true, they don't know me well, but it's not. So this is an interesting issue. It's a difficult issue, and I know we're dealing with your memories, and when you deal with people's memories, it's very difficult. It's difficult to deal with memories. So anyway, that's where I am at the moment. I'm struggling with the issue of naming, and I'm struggling with the issue, is there not a alternate thing we could do to honor the man at the same time, maybe not name the theater after him. So anyway, that's where I'm struggling, so that's where I am.
Thank you, Ira.
Between Robin and Ira, they completely summed up everything and we're grappling with that. The fact that we're left with only one option is very, it's weighing on it. It's a very tough decision.
Can I make a few comments about what I've learned over the last, I guess it's been less than January of 2018. First and foremost, I have 3 kids in the district. I didn't go here when I was in high school or elementary school, but I can only hope that my kids, after they get out of Byron Hills, will be in a community of alumni that have been cohesive and band together and truly care about this place. So the first thing I want to say is thank you to all of you for spending time on this and for informing us of what clearly was a great teacher and a great man. The second thing I would say is that the story of Jean Bissell has clearly come out through all of this. It's come out in all the letters, it's come out tonight, it's come out in the commentary that we've had at previous board meetings. And for me, it's really powerful because I think the relevancy to students today is that as they look to relationships with their teachers and as their teachers look to relationships with them, wouldn't it be amazing if these relationships generate impact that will impact their lives well beyond the subject matter of what the teacher teaches. It's probably what every teacher hopes for and clearly what Jean Bissell seems to have been able to do to all the people that have come forward. I too struggle with the issue of naming the auditorium because I think that if we move forward and do that, what I keep thinking about is the relative sort of, in essence, comparison that it's sort of stating implicitly and explicitly versus others that have been in the Byram Hills community as whether teachers, staff, or administrators. And because of the passage of time, but not only because of that, it's very difficult to make comparisons to say that this means that we should name the theater after him when, ultimately I think if we do that, realistically, we do know that from our experience in the district over the past many years that we've been involved, that there are some absolutely outstanding teachers and administrators and staff that have retired or are still serving at Byram Hills in their various capacities. And so it would be my expectation that if we did this, we do have to think about the broader issue of, will there be a hallway named 6 months from now, and then will there be the outdoor field name? I think that's a realistic thing to think about because we know that there are a bunch of special faculty and staff that we have and administrators that do have unbelievable impact and outsized impact. So what I struggle with is there a way to encapsulate his story, but not necessarily name the theater after him, as per some of the discussions a little bit earlier.
There's one other point I wanted to make.
Please.
And I think it's important to hear it because it goes into at least my thinking, maybe others. I think to an extent, a drama teacher, an athletics coach, deal with students on a level different than a teacher. If you're a drama teacher, the interaction you have with a student is just not the same as you have as a classroom teacher. Your impact, I think, is different. Your interaction is different. True, they may be tenured faculty, but I think it's obvious that in working with students to prepare a musical production, dramatic production, it's a lot different than teaching them physics or AP calculus. I just think it's an obvious thing. The same point, an athletics coach, someone who coaches a soccer team, a football team, a basketball team, their post 3 p.m. interaction with students, I think, becomes an outsized event that when people look and say, oh, he was great, they're looking at it in the context of those dealings. I'm not saying that Mr. Bissell should be punished because of it. I'm simply saying it's a factor that has to play into weighing what his impact was, and when you were comparing it to impact of classroom teachers, administrators, whatever, who might also qualify for this type of incredible honor. It's something that I just think it's another factor that we have to consider. I know that because when I was in high school 120 years ago, I remember I took part in dramatic production. Pardon me. I played athletics. I played several sports. And I know the interaction I had with my drama teacher, the interaction I had with my sports coaches. It's just different, and it's a different dynamic. You can't, you can't in any way, I think you can't put it on the same plane as what a teacher may do, although a teacher in the long run may actually have greater impact. It's another.
I just set the record straight. Mr. Bissell was a music teacher.
No, I know.
Classroom.
No. I'm not. Don't please. I'm not brooking argument here, and I'm not in any way. Don't. If you take this as a denigration of him, you're absolutely missing. Hold on, wait, please.
Not time for comment.
Please.
Yeah.
I'm not. Then you're missing my point. I said he was a tenured faculty member. I understand that. I'm simply saying that his interaction with students as the dramatic coach, head of drama, and with these musicals, I think it's only natural. It creates these incredibly powerful memories and these incredible powerful facts that lead you to come here to say, name the theater after him. My point being, we have to, as a board, in exercising and in implementing our policy, we have to be sure that we're weighing this properly. It's nothing to do with that he wasn't great. Clearly, the man was great in what he did. So I'm well aware that he was a fully tenured faculty, and he certainly deserved it.
Can I respond to some of that, or just some of the points that you raised?
Yeah, I think we're not necessarily having a debate, but we can certainly encourage more board discussion.
I would just like to say that what I was struck most by is, what this has created, among the alumni and all of you coming out and finding each other once again, and Facebook groups that have come together are just remarkable. I'm a theater kid. I grew up in Brooklyn, but I have same feelings and thoughts towards my drama teachers, and I get it. I understand. A lot of my ability to speak publicly comes from my drama teacher. My love of theater came from that, and it's the camaraderie among the alumni that I'm most struck by, and all of the letters, and it's a very difficult decision, but we sort of feel like the board are the gatekeepers of what's to come for the future. And I have to say that I agree that naming something is a one-time event. You're all gonna come out, we're gonna, name the theater, let's say, and then it's over. And the name stays there, but, something like a scholarship or something else the board has been talking about is something that can happen annually. And that, Mr. Bissell can be, celebrated annually that way. I mean, that's just something to think about, and I think.
Remind people of who he is.
Yes, and, I think that that's a better way to celebrate somebody, and.
I must also say that I really haven't made my mind up on this yet. I just think we're having a public discussion. We should discuss our thoughts with you publicly, and in public. I'm not,
Right.
this is really what I'm thinking about it, but no one's
I
asking me to vote yet.
I want to reiterate to everybody here and people at home that the entire board has read every single one of the emails that
Yeah.
came in. They were beautiful. They were heartbreaking, they were touching, they made us cry
Yes.
and laugh. They were amazing. I think that that's every educator's dream, is to have this kind of, to elicit this kind of response from their former students. It's a beautiful thing. And I hope you understand that what we're struggling with is not whether or not he should be honored, but what's the
How
best
he
way
should be honored,
to honor him, both for him and the district and for all of you.
Since you didn't speak before, if you want to come before us, just give a very brief
Just to
comment.
let you know who I am.
Yep.
I personally reviewed every single production for 20 years in the North Castle News. And what struck me...
Could you
well,
state your name? Sorry,
the
could you
first
state
thing
your
I-
name?
Do you
What
mind
is your name?
sharing your name, please?
My name's Peter Hahn.
Thank you.
Early on, I made the comment that these productions should be reviewed as professional productions. And I went on to say that the only difference between professional performances and these performances were the fact that the kids obviously didn't have mature voices, nor could they dance as well as professional dancers. But as far as projection and acting is concerned, there was no difference, and nobody ever objected to the way we wrote about them. Now, it was not a professional in the sense of New York Times reviews, because the kids were performing existing plays, and when plays are reviewed, when they're put on Broadway for the first time, they talk about the play as well as the acting. So I was relieved of that problem. But I think I can speak to the problem that you people have. And I used to talk about Crittenden, and who the hell is he? I wondered. I lived in this community since 1957.
Now we all know.
We all know.
The name thing, he's not, Lincoln Memorial, that's one thing. But Crittenden in a small town is another. I'm totally in agreement with your point of view on that. But I think everybody's not missing something, but I think this whole situation can be resolved by thinking about Mr. Bissell independent of his role as a music teacher and a person who promoted the theater that we all know about, and simply concentrate on the concept of excellence. Now, I'm 95 years old, I've been around, and I probably lived 2 or 3 parallel lives in my time by accident. So, I've met a hell of a lot of people in my time. And excellence is very, very rare indeed. And if you can link the concept of excellence with the name Bissell and the naming of this theater, and to do something about keeping this story that we were all talking about here alive from year to year, I think it would be a little bit different than simply naming a school after a person. The idea of excellence, not only from the standpoint of kids, which I'm sure all of us are thinking about, but the idea of excellence for teachers. We're not only talking about the impact of the name on the student body, but also on the teachers. Now, as Will Rogers says, when he was going to solve the submarine problem in World War I, he said all you have to do is heat the ocean up to 212 degrees, the submarines will come up and you can shoot them down. Now, I realize that it's a problem. There is the ocean to 212 degrees, but I'm an idea man. That's a detail. So, but if you can, link the name with excellence, the idea of excellence, and incidentally, it happens to be in music.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And in so doing, make what we're talking about here viable from year to year.
Okay.
So,
I appreciate
even though he's not Lincoln, he can be memorialized in fact.
I open it up to any other board members.
I would just add that the feedback from the community and the alumni have certainly made an impact on myself and going through the letters of not knowing this person. But obviously, with the naming, we've got these concepts like extraordinary and broad impact. And to me, many of those things seem like they've been hit in a variety of ways. And I'll tell you, when this first started out, just to be candid, as Ira mentioned, I don't think we should be in the naming business, but I have to tell you, not only today's meeting and the feedback, but the outpouring of some of the alumni have certainly given, my view on this a little bit different with that.
Anybody else have any comments, thoughts?
There's one person that's
Byron
still-
Hills, we've really been blessed with many, many, many teachers and administrators of excellence. I mean, just in the past 5 years, we've had people retire and move on who seemed, when you talk about Gene Bissell, they seem to also rise to that level. I think we're very blessed in this community to have people who hire these amazing people, and our children are so blessed to be able to be taught by them. It was so nice hearing about Gene Bissell tonight. Thank you so much for all your kind words.
There may have been someone in the third row that hasn't spoken.
Yeah.
Yep.
My name is Carol Del Savio. My husband was a teacher at Byron Hills for many, many years. But in addition to that, we have 3 daughters who went to school here. All 3 of them were involved, 2 in a minor way in the drama program, 1 in a major way. She actually had the pleasure to star in many of his wonderful, wonderful, wonderful shows. So we did see what's happening. But beyond all that, because I know we're all accepting that he was a wonderful teacher, a wonderful person with children, and he inspired a lot. I'm looking upon the board, and I really do understand your difficulty with naming. But I would also like to point out that being able to name something is a very powerful piece of what you can do. And by naming it, you put the capital letter in front of it. So it's not the auditorium, it's the Gene P. Bissell Auditorium. And that leads people to say, oh, why is it named? And that leads people to say, oh, really? You have a history of strong drama here? That, I think, is what we're saying. It's not just to honor him. It is actually to honor a history, a tradition in the school that is not known by many people, but can serve as an inspiration and mark Byron Hills High School as having contributed to that type of education.
Thank you.
Leah?
Yes, if
Excuse
you
me,
just
I'd just like
wouldn't
to-
mind keeping it brief, but
I'll
yes.
keep it brief. I'd just like to address a couple of the points that you have all brought up. We are firsthand, we're not secondhand. Maybe I misunderstood what you said before.
We're second.
We were here and we experienced it, and I'd like to sort of concur with Mr. Hahn in terms of, thinking of him as excellent across the board and not just as musical theater. And he did teach classes and had regular students, and a number of them, and community members. It's not just people who are in musical theater that are behind this. I think that you all are fairly well aware of that, but I just like to state it one more time. And as far as in terms of honoring him and naming the theater after him, for myself personally, he was first. The reason there's such a wonderful, phenomenal theater program today, and the other people that are excellent and fabulous and shine as well, is because he set that bar. And if that bar didn't exist, no one would have gone looking to keep that bar that high. And I feel that because he was first, it is appropriate that the theater is named after him. That's my own personal feeling. But to address the H.C. Crittenden issue, that's something that some of the alumni that we have discussed and gone through. And we have a potential solution for that, which is that it's not just slapping his name on that wall, or on that door, but a plaque that's appropriate that goes with it, that would state who he was and why his name is on that door. And I would suggest, in the sense of Crittenden, take whatever's written on the back of that picture, make a plaque, stick it next to the picture, and then people know when they see the picture. But something along the lines of, Mr. Bissell was an extraordinary music, theater, and choir director, mentor and friend to the students and community of Byram Hills within his theater. Between 1968 and 1987, he created magic, joy, and a sense of belonging for all through his boundless energy in pursuit of perfection. He motivated students to achieve the highest standards of excellence, helped them to find their voices beyond the stage, and become a lifelong inspiration to them. In so doing, he laid the foundation of an enduring Byram Hills theater tradition.
Thank you. I think with that, as a very fitting ending to a very great tribute, does anybody else have any comments? Otherwise, I think I would ask for a motion to vote on, and maybe I should just be specific in what we would be voting for, and also talk a little bit about our policy. So our policy requires a full board, which we have present, and 5 Board of Education members to vote yes in order to do a naming. And what I'd ask for a motion for is around naming the theater. This is not about anything else that we could potentially think of as a district in terms of Wall of Fame or anything like that. But I would.
So this voting doesn't rule out an award or an
Correct.
honor?
So this is a vote strictly on the naming.
Naming
of the
of
theater.
the auditorium.
What was it?
Not to exclude thinking about other ways in which we can encapsulate these stories.
Well, I guess the question is, before we do that, let's see if the board's ready to vote.
No question.
No.
Well, let's see, I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to be a little formal about this, if you don't mind. I mean, I'd like to make sure we have 4 board members who are ready to vote on this.
Sure.
So if I mean, you can ask, but I'm
Yep.
going to make sure, because I would like to think about it some more, but if it's the consensus of the board to vote on it tonight, so be it, we'll vote.
Fair enough. Why don't we just go down and say, if not how you're voting, but if you're ready to vote.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Then we're ready.
Ready.
Okay.
Fair enough. So we made the motion. We had first and a second, and so now we vote. All in favor?
All in favor of naming the theater?
And they naming the theater, right? Okay. All opposed? Any abstention? Okay. All right. Well, I apologize for where we ended up, but I really do hope that you've taken the messages to heart that we talked about, because I think that we really all have been moved over the course of the last many months as we've read through all this testimony and heard from so many of you. And I think there is a story to be told, and we should put thought to how it should be told.
Yeah.
And this is just one
I
mechanism.
don't see this as the end of the issue.
I don't
This is
either.
just the
No,
first step of
absolutely.
the issue.
I don't
It
either.
shouldn't be.
I would love to
We
honor.
want to honor.
theater. I would love to honor
I
a
think
theater
he belongs.
students and
We
let them
should
know.
honor him.
Yep, I think we all sort of feel, I don't want to speak for everybody, but just in the commentary that this is an extraordinary individual who is in our district, and we do need to find a way to tell the story. I think we decided tonight that it won't be with the theater naming, but it does not mean that we can't find a meaningful way to pay tribute to what was an extraordinary person and someone that had a lasting impact on many of our alumni.
Right.
Does anybody else have any?
Take a break.
May I
Yeah, of
have a
course,
comment?
of course.
So prior to this entire process, I had recommended that at the Theater Wall of Fame, Gene Bissell was the first person inducted. And knowing that he was the first person inducted and the mark that he had on the district, my recommendation at the time was to work with Matthew Gable, considering he did the open letter and he's quite a good writer, to come up with some biography that could be placed next to Gene Bissell's picture, at the very least, to let everyone know why was this person the first person selected. He was the person that they had in mind when they decided to do that. And so that would be one recommendation for the board. And then I think that this is a really strong alumni network. And we are Byram Hill strong, not because we, are sad when things don't go the direction that we want them to, but this is evidence of people rallying for something they really believe in. And having worked in the district for 30 years and feeling like, with the exception of Peter Hahn, I might be the historian of the district. Mr. Hahn, I would love to take you to lunch, but not on district time. I will take a half day and take you to lunch, because I think you have a lot you could share with me about the history that was here before I came 30 years ago. But I would also encourage, and perhaps it's Mr. Gable who may want to do it, and I will reach out to him personally, if there's any way that the alumni network wants to come together in support of the district, I encourage that, and I am for that, and would help to facilitate that with Mr. Gable. I have never seen such an outpouring for a teacher publicly. I hear it, having been a teacher here for many years. Students of mine who were in their late 30s and 40s are now coming back to see me and are writing me letters, and but to see a group of people who came together, this is pretty much the first time I've seen it. I know that there was a teacher in the high school in the 70s who was about to get excessed, and kids did a walkout and a march and signed petitions, and other than hearing about that, I've never heard of a group of students, current or former, who have rallied like this for something they believe in. So I would be very happy to work with Matthew Gable or any alumni to increase that relationship. You are all people who have been the missing link for me in the 30 years that I've been here. I don't know anything about people when they leave. And that's something we really want to encourage. And although it isn't going to be through the theater naming, it could very well be through other endeavors, and I would love to do that.
That's very well said, and I personally would agree with all of that, but I open it up to see
I
everybody
think
else.
what speaks loudly tonight is that we know that this is an excellent school district. I grew up here, I raised my children here, they went to school here and graduated. We had excellent teachers, all of us, and excellent people and mentors. But no one has come and raised this level of support by alumni. No one. And no one's asking it to be named the Wayne Stout, the Lou Del Savio, the Jean Buffington. No one's asking for that. They're asking for something for Jean Bissell, and I think that speaks volumes.
There will be something.
Yeah.
There will be more for him, it just won't be in this way.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
There will be.
And
There
I
will-
do
there
understand
will
that
We hear
struggle.
be. It's a difficult thing, but there will be. We're not, this is not the end in terms of him being honored in an appropriate way beyond the way he's already been honored. We're going to see to that.
I'm curious about something. Do you know anything about other school districts? Do they have their theaters named after anybody? Does anybody know? Because I know from White Plains High School, we did have things that were named after people, whether it was a sporting event or whatever. Do you know? I have no
We do
idea.
have sporting events. We have programs that we've named after. We do that.
You do.
We absolutely do that. They're programs, not facilities and scholarships we
Yeah,
have.
we have the Robert Pavlica Science Research Program. We have the Varley Players. We have,
Bobcat, Michaelina Bobcat Run.
oh, the Michaelino. Yeah, we named programs, but other than this building and Mr. Crittenden's building, we haven't done it, and some
But you
people.
don't know about other high schools and
Well,
what they've done,
we-
do you?
look, I know I was interested, so I spoke to people, and I don't want to say there's a trend, but it's not the trend that you'd want.
I'm just curious.
Because of it's not really the favored way to honor people. What I did see it happen in, is one district, happened to, a good friend of mine lives, where this teacher taught for 70 years, and they didn't name a building after him, they really named a corner of the library after him, because he used to go there all the time and just read, so they gave him like a cubicle, but it wasn't a building, it wasn't a major portion of the edifice. Doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, it just means that we didn't see certainly a trend in that direction. But if you walk out here with anything on your minds, please walk out here understanding the esteem in which we hold not only Gene's work, but
all of you.
but your advocacy
Oh my
for
God.
him. And we are sure you'll make sure that we don't let this drop, because we don't intend to.
And our hope is that we come up with something that's perhaps
It's
more
meaningful.
meaningful
Yeah.
and more lasting and more tangible for the current students to understand the impact that he had on all of you. And, you know,
The High Blatt Award still exists.
Exactly.
It does.
Right.
Yeah.
It was two names.
That was
It's Blatt
I
and
graduated.
Wallenberg. It's Blatt Wallenberg Award or something.
Now it's, yes,
Yeah.
right.
And
right,
every year, the students get to hear why the award is given.
Well, actually, that might be a great way of doing this, is having some kind
Yeah.
of special
Okay.
award for everyone.
So we're going to take a short break before we go on to our next order of business. But just in closing, I think I will reiterate what Ira said, what Mia said, that you have our commitment that we will continue to give this serious thought, and we look forward to communicating with you publicly.
And I look forward with the alumni not closing the door to their relationship with the district, and looking at this as an opportunity to open that door and have conversations with me to keep a history alive here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful teaching.
So before we go to item 10.3, there's one thing that we have to go a little bit backwards on, which is just to accept the audit report. So could I ask for a resolution, motion to accept the audit report?
So moved.
All in favor? Okay, we've accepted this year's audit report. Great. So with that, we'll go to 10.3, which is charitable contributions, which is clearly a topic that we've talked about before, but the matter at hand tonight is quite specific. So we spoke about how on April 23rd, there were proposed IRS regulations that have come out which impairs incentives for taxpayers to make contribution to charitable reserve funds that are established under New York state law. And since that time, we have had the opportunity, Superintendent Lamia and I have had the opportunity to speak with a group of other superintendents and board members throughout Westchester, and we were exposed to some interesting work that a law firm is doing. It's a very experienced law firm on tax matters, and they have pointed out really a series of inconsistencies in the federal regulations, and they're seeking answers. There's a period of time that the IRS invites comments that any interested party could make, and that period of time expires on October 11th. So this firm is in the process of asking if any local municipalities or districts might want to basically join the coalition of school districts and municipalities that choose to do this, to put forth something to the IRS that explains the legal inconsistencies and seeks answers, as well as what would be attached would be a resolution that we could talk tonight about passing. So the decisions are really as follows. One, do we pass the resolution that was in the packet regarding this matter, where we're really asking for answers to inconsistencies and questions? And then the second thing to talk about is, do we voluntarily make a $1,000 payment to this law firm for the fact that they have done substantive work on this matter? It's a fee, in essence, that we can choose to pay or not at this juncture. And then the last thing I guess I would say is that to the extent this goes, that's all really that we're talking about tonight, because then the IRS will either respond or not, and any subsequent actions would have to be brought back to the board in terms of whether there was any future litigation or that we wanted to be a part of or not part of. That's not really on the table tonight because there's no litigation to be part of. This is simply about looking at a resolution, whether to pass it, and then thinking about whether we want to support this law firm by paying them a $1,000 fee, which they're asking all school districts and municipalities that do submit the resolution to pay, but it is optional, and they did say that they would accept a resolution without that payment. So with that, I would open it up to discussion, and Ira's not with us right now, but I do have his view, so I can share it as we have the discussion.
I can't think of a compelling reason not to participate in at least taking this forward to the question, through the questioning stage. Yeah.
I think it's a fiduciary responsibility to do that.
Yeah, and that's, how I come out as well, and Ira said the same thing. I think it's never belittle money to be spent, especially on legal, but at the end of the day, this does really, I think, impact the potential future of the district in so many ways. And so if we could take this step to at least try to get some answers, which is really what we're asking for now, answers from the government, then that would be, I think, a service that we could provide to the community.
Yeah, I think we're being responsible to our taxpayers by following through on this and asking these questions.
Do we have any idea, just out of curiosity, what percentage of the school districts that are part of this are contributing the $1,000 and whatnot? Do we have any idea?
No.
We don't know.
I know one that has and one that hasn't.
Okay. But again, this isn't obligating us any further. This is just
Correct.
paying them for the work they've done to present these questions to the federal government.
That's exactly right.
And we do not have to pay if you just want to sign a resolution. So
Okay.
it doesn't mean that you have to send them $1,000.
Right.
And then what would happen with this resolution, to the extent we passed it, is that it would be attached to the letter that the law firm submits, where it really outlines their arguments and asks for answers, and that's at this point the extent. So it's really their submission of comments during the comment period. And one of the important components is that if you're submitting comments, like, are there parties that are impacted by this? And clearly we view ourselves as impacted by it, and so that's why they're going out to municipalities and school districts. But there's nothing in it that obligates us for anything further.
And just to be clear, this law firm has voluntarily taken on this responsibility. I don't have a problem with contributing to cover their fees and their services. They're going to be putting in a lot more than $1,000 worth of work.
For sure. Okay, so I guess unless anybody has any other comments, then I would ask for a motion to pass the resolution. And I will read the resolution, actually, maybe I can read the resolution right now. Does that make sense? Okay, so resolution charitable contributions. Whereas in response to the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the state of New York has enacted legislation as part of its fiscal year 2019 budget that authorizes counties, local governments, and school districts to establish a charitable gifts reserve fund that may be used to defray some of the costs related to public education, healthcare, or other public service provided by that entity. Whereas the state of New York has also enacted legislation which allows counties, local governments, and public school districts the option to authorize by means of resolution a real property tax credit of up to 95% of the amount of the property of a property owner's monetary contribution to an established charitable reserve fund during the associated credit year. Whereas individual taxpayers may be incentivized to contribute generously to these charitable funds out of the expectation that the pairing of an increased charitable deduction at the federal level combined with a real property tax credit at the local level may mitigate the effects of the new $10,000 cap on state and local tax deductions imposed by TCJA, which is the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Whereas the IRS issued on August 23, 2018, proposed regulations providing rules on the availability of federal charitable contribution deductions when the taxpayer receives or expects to receive a corresponding state or local tax credit. Whereas the proposed regulations rules that a taxpayer who makes a contribution to a charitable reserve fund and subsequently receives a state or local tax credit that exceeds 15% of the contribution must reduce his or her charitable contribution by the amount of any tax credit he or she received at the state or local level.
Just say charitable deduction.
Oh, really missed.
Charitable deduction.
Thank
Instead
you.
of contribution.
Oh, charitable deduction, appreciate it. By the, no, thank you. By the amount of any tax credit he or she received at the state or local level. Whereas state, county, and local entities have expressed confusion, doubt, and skepticism on the draft regulations and have raised questions as to whether they constitute an arbitrary and capricious interpretation of federal tax law, particularly in the context of the treatment of existing state tax credit programs that predate the TCJA and the stated preservation of the deductibility of contributions made by businesses. Whereas the IRS has invited the public to submit comments on the proposed regulations no later than October 11, 2018, now therefore be it resolved that the Byram Hills Central School District believes that proposed regulations issued by the IRS on August 23, 2018 dramatically impair the incentives for individual taxpayers to make contributions to these charitable reserve funds as established by law in the state of New York, and in doing so impair the mission of these funds, namely providing a high-quality public education to all students residing within the district. Be it further resolved that the Byram Hills Central School District believes the proposed regulations issued by the IRS on August 23, 2018 provide insufficient clarity on many topics, as well as arbitrary and unfair distinctions between deductions for individuals compared to deductions for businesses, and contributions to support public education compared to contributions to support private education. Be it further resolved that the Byram Hills Central School District finds it necessary and appropriate to propose changes to the proposed regulations issued by the IRS to provide additional clarity for the taxpayers of the Byram Hills Central School District and to explain and remove any arbitrary distinctions that would effectively and unfairly disadvantage the taxpayers of the Byram Hills Central School District. Be it further resolved that the Byram Hills Central School District may submit public comments on or before October 11th, 2018 that shall reflect the concerns outlined above, and be it further resolved that the Byram Hills Central School District may seek to collaborate with other like-minded state, county, municipality, or school district agencies or organizations to express these concerns publicly and to advocate for fair regulations and equitable and principled interpretation of federal tax law that recognizes and rewards the value of contributions in support of the Byram Hills Central School District, no matter whether the contributor is an individual or a business, or whether the charitable entity is public or private. So with that, I make a motion to accept that resolution.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Okay, motion carries.
So they
All right.
say they'll get it on
And-
time from us.
Yes, as long as we submit it by tomorrow.
And do you need an agreement for the check also?
You know what, just to be safe, why don't I make a motion to pay the $1,000 to the law firm, Baker.
I'll second, or I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. That was everybody, right? Just want to make sure. Okay.
Except I.
Yeah. Okay. All right, with that, we go to 10.4, adoption of the 2019-20 budget materials.
So easy. Already.
I come over to Mike. Yep.
Great, thank you. Each year, the board and now we call it the Finance Advisory Committee develop a calendar with the district which outlines a variety of budget hearings, starting with budget hearing number 1 on January 15th, and then several hearings into April with the budget adoption meeting on April 23rd. These dates provide ample communication and time for members of the public to attend those budget hearings and to understand the budget. And I would encourage everyone in the community to follow some of this. I know it can be difficult, but we're giving ample scheduling and time for the community to participate and to understand the budget process. It culminates on May 21st of 2019 with a budget vote. The Finance Advisory Committee, as well as the board, have a district charge that we have around the budget. It's to establish a budget calendar, which I just mentioned, in conjunction with the superintendent, prepare budget guidelines for board approval, review and consider modifications where necessary in developing the budget, including written material and communication to the community. We review the methodology for updating long-range forecast and plans. We conduct with the board public hearings to receive comments and recommendations relative to the budget development process, and it's publicized in all hearings, and we detail those critical dates. We work closely with the superintendent on the presentation of the administration's proposed budget. We conduct with the board public hearings during which the proposed budget is prepared by the administration and it's reviewed for conformance to our guidelines, critically analyze all the support and justification for the budget. We recommend to the board a budget that meets the budget guidelines, and all of this is done with collaboration of the superintendent and the communications committee to culminate in a brochure for the taxpayers and other communications via outreach programs. I won't go through all of the budget guidelines. I know these are detailed in the materials, but I will highlight several. The administration will prepare a fiscally sound and responsible budget. We have a fiduciary responsibility as a board to do that. We take a long-term view of our revenues and liabilities, and we'll compare those against recent years' experiences, including a 5-year trend analysis, which is very important, and provide that expenditure analysis to the board. The administration will take into consideration the board goals and make the necessary budget allocations with an aim of tightly controlling expenditure growth. We're also looking at enrollment projections within that 5-year trend. We want to make sure that the content and the quality of our educational programs is evaluated and reviewed. Remember, the most important thing of keeping the education quality for our children intact. The budget will comply with all federal and state mandates, including the consideration of the tax levy cap law. We'll have within these guidelines a budget presentation will include a variety of details involving the decision-making program and anticipated revenues and anticipated expenses. Our debt service is taken into consideration as well. We'll look at a capital asset preservation plan, which is the basis for the maintenance of improvements on our district's assets, the facilities and the buildings, as well as transportation. We will look to replace the district equipment that will incur with the coordinates to the comprehensive district-wide needs. So we'll look at the needs of the district on all expenditures. The superintendent will present a staff needs plan, which provides the most effective employment for certified staff. The administration's proposed budget will be prepared with all grades, K through 12 approach. The budget expenditures will be derived from supplier quotations and data that's presented to the board. And the board and the administration will continue efforts of communications outreach to the community and sustain and build community support and understanding. I would accent that over the years we've had a budget information committee. We detail a number of these projections and numbers in a slew of meetings all throughout the first quarter. And I would encourage, again, the community to be involved in understanding what we put forward.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Robert.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to go back to the Finance Advisory Committee charge for a second. This is a new committee for the board, and so the charge is new, and I just wanted to bring up one of the points just to briefly discuss it. Recommend to the board a budget that meets the budget guidelines. Traditionally, the entire board has been involved. Obviously, the budget is something critical that we all do. This here, to me, reads like the Finance Committee is going to go work on the budget and then present it to the board. It's not how we've ever done it, so I just wanted to delve into that a little bit, what the thought is on this.
I think this is the first time this charge has been put together with respect to the Finance Advisory Committee.
But the Finance Advisory Committee is not the entire board.
I know, that's why
Right.
I'm questioning this one particular item.
Which one is it, Robin?
Number eight on the,
Okay.
number 8 on the charge.
Recommend to the board a budget that
It
meets
sounds
budget
like the
guidelines.
Finance Committee, this says it's going to work in their room with our business officials and come back to the board and say, here's the budget. That's not how we've done it in the past.
So that isn't different than we've ever had before. To my knowledge, these are the same guidelines we've always used. It's just that we're now giving it a different title of the Financial Advisory
maybe
Committee.
that-
But I'm
It's
thinking,
kind of a funny,
yeah, maybe it is. Yeah, but
maybe I'm
I
reading
think
it
the
wrong.
recommendation to the board is just, I'm recommending that this is a budget that actually meets the guidelines that we all discussed. Not that I'm working on the
Well, I
budget.
think, because before it was, the way it's been done is the procedures
Yeah,
around
maybe-
putting together the budget, not the budget. This, to me, says budget. Maybe it's always been in there, maybe we just never
It
paid
has,
attention
but
to
maybe
it.
recommend to the
proposed
board that
budget.
the budget, or not even recommend.
Not the budget, yeah,
Yeah.
right. I just, because the way this sounds like, they go in the room, come up with a budget and say, here, board.
Right.
Right,
Well,
That's not what it should be,
No.
at least in my opinion, but.
I think we envision using the same process that we did last year, where the principals and the directors will come in, they'll present to the whole board and what have you.
Right.
And the budget finance committee now will go into a little bit more depth in some of these areas. In terms of making a recommendation to the whole board, I think the whole board is going to be involved in the process just like you were last year. So I think the recommendation is just the final.
I probably should say that the budget meets the budget guidelines.
Because nothing will change in terms of the process by which the full board
It's
vets
just, I
the
guess,
budget.
It's not recommending a budget, it's
budget, right.
recommending that the budget meets the
Meets the
guidelines.
guidelines, right, yeah.
The budget that's presented to us.
Right.
Not that they go and,
Right, but the way it's worded, recommend to the board a budget, but not.
That the budget.
That the budget meets
meets the
the budget,
guidelines.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, just that one little tweak makes all the
Yeah.
difference
That
in the
makes
world.
sense,
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other
Thanks, Rob.
questions? Do you have anything else, Jim, at this point? or-
We've kicked off the budget process. We do that early in the year. We met with the administrative council last week, reviewed a few items with them. The budget process is going to, as I mentioned, follow the same steps as we did last year. If there's any changes in the process, I think that would be after the new business official takes over and takes a look and works his way through it this year, and then he can make recommendations on any changes. We have the beds information now, the enrollment, so we get our demographic report. We use that to generate the building allocations. So the principals usually get those toward the end of October, beginning of November. And then they have their own budget calendar where they meet with their staff, and then they have to get information back to us prior to the December holidays, so we can get it input and then start meeting the budget hearing deadlines that we have here. So we're on our way. The word that I got on inflation, it's running a little bit higher than 2%. So in terms of the tax cap, right now they're projecting that will be the 2%. It's 2% or inflation, whichever is less. So right now the state's projecting, or New York State as well, the Association of School Business Officials is projecting that it's going to be a 2% tax cap, which would be good also. So that's where we are.
Okay, so I guess with that, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the 2019-20 budget materials, which includes the charge of the committee.
With one
and
revision.
then with
With the one revision.
With the one revision. Yep, absolutely.
I'll make that motion.
All in favor? All right. New York State testing.
Me?
Oh, boy. You say it's going so fast. It is 10 to 10.
Okay. Well, thank you for continuing your attention to this meeting and the assessment report, which is finally here. And just for our public, this is coming about a month late because the state had embargoed the results. They were still working on their data analysis, and so we got them a little bit late. About 2 weeks ago, the embargo was lifted, but I want to run through the assessment report. I will gloss over some slides, but feel free to stop and ask questions, or if you have any commentary on the slides at any point, just feel free to interrupt. And that is a picture of our summer robotics camp with students from rising 6th through 9th grade students, which was really popular. Some background on state testing. I just want to point out the red highlight here is that my numbers will go back to 2013, which was the start of the Common Core tests. The Common Core standards were adopted in 2011 by the Board of Regents, and then the new test started in 2013, so the data before that was irrelevant. Also, I want to point out that similar to 2016, the 2018 assessments were realigned to the standards. A new standard setting process took place, and the commissioner has ruled that these tests this year or last year in 2018 cannot be compared directly to previous years. They did that in 2013, and then that was the case in 2013 and 16 as well. So based on those changes, I want to make a little bit of commentary at the start of the presentation, and I want to question what these test results really mean. When you look back over the past 6 years, we've had standards that have changed several times. In 2013, they were adjusted a few years ago. in 2016. The test format has changed several times when the state has tried to shorten the length of the test. That has happened over multiple years. They keep changing the cut scores and scaled scores. Also, the test refusal rate remains relatively high statewide at around 18%. And our results went down this past year, but before that were really high. So what impact is that having on the results? We've questioned that at previous assessment report meetings. Computer-based testing has been introduced. It's not fully adopted statewide. That'll take place in a few more years. We have not yet jumped into this computer-based testing because Dr. Taylor and I want to make sure that the state has the glitches worked out of the system. You'll recall last year there were some issues that occurred in some districts. The state did put out a report that students performed better on the paper-based assessments. What they do is then they equalize it so that those scores are the same, have the same meaning, but students don't perform as well on the computer-based tests. So again, that makes me question what these test results really mean when the state is making, they're using statistics to make this, to get the results that they want.
The more adjustments you make.
Exactly, and they're constantly making adjustments, which make you really question the validity of these tests. And finally, we're getting the results 5 months after the students take the test. And given the opt-out movement, given our downplay of state tests, I wonder what the incentive for students is to perform on these assessments. I came across in a book I'm reading on curiosity, I came across a study, so I looked up the study and have read it. It's a really interesting study on incentives in education. So it's taking behavioral economic theory, which I know nothing about, so I Googled it and spent a few minutes reading about it. But it's basically the psychology applied to economics. Why do we buy what we buy? What's purchasing power? What does that mean? How do companies get us to buy and spend money? So some behavioral economics are applying incentive theory to education. So they did a research study and they've had several parts to it. One part is where students show up to school and you take a group of kids and you say to some kids, we're going to give you $10 if you do well on this test. Defining what well is, if you outperform your previous score. And guess what happens? So when you look at the results from the control group to the kids that were offered the day of the test, they didn't have time to study extra. The students who were offered $10 perform better. And not just a little better. When you do an analysis on how much better, it's 6 months of learning better by offering them $10.
But we can't pay
That
that.
won't be a line item.
Well, I'm wondering if I can do a line item in the budget since we're launching the budget season.
Send an email
We could just
home
pay.
right before the test, tell every parent to bribe their kid with $10.
Right.
So given incentive
kids
theory,
can
it
ask
just makes us question education policy and the time we're spending on this. What do these results really mean? What is influencing these results besides just our own curriculum, our instructional processes? And so I wanted to put that out there as a caveat to this assessment report, that we have to look at them through just a very narrow lens of what they're for. I will say I'll come back to that in a moment. I will say what the tests do stand for is these are low stakes tests in the 3 through 8 ELA and math. They're not high stakes tests. The high stakes tests come when you have that gate to graduation, which happens in high school. These tests were designed initially to identify students who aren't meeting the benchmark so that we could provide services to them and get them ready for high school curriculum and those high stakes tests. It's also making sure that our curriculum's aligned. Maybe we have gaps, maybe we're not teaching some things that are aligned to the standards, or maybe we're not teaching them in the best ways. So the state tests at 3 through 8 ELA and math are designed for those three purposes. Is your curriculum aligned? Are you having the best instructional practices? And what students aren't yet meeting those that you can provide services to?
Potentially, maybe future teacher evaluations too is still hanging out.
Well,
there.
that's still hanging out there, and that is a use of the test. That wasn't the initial design of the test, and I
Right.
would still argue that that is, can we really tie these tests to teacher evaluation? But that's how we use the tests right now, and I think that's the appropriate way to use the test. So we're really looking at proficiency. We're looking at how many kids are not yet meeting the benchmarks, and what can we put in place to make sure that they get there by the time they get to high school. That's what we're looking for in these tests. I just want to remind you of the refusal rate. We looked at this data in June. I would just want to point out these years, because in the data I'll point out a few times this might have influenced the results, which is 3rd grade back in 2016. We had an unusually high rate of test refusals, and also in 8th grade and ELA and math. Those were extremely high, which we think at the time we had a discussion about the impact that might have had on those test results. It'll show up now that we're starting to look at some years beyond that.
What was the state in last year was what? Was it like
It was 18% for
18.
ELA and math.
Overall
Yeah.
in the state?
Overall in the state. And we were
Oh,
at
here,
10.
oh, I see, okay, 18
Yeah.
versus 10, got it.
Yeah, so you can start to see where our results are here if you look. The state has dropped it only slightly. We've managed to go from the very high rates above state now down to 10. And I think that's because we're trying to give our community some confidence that we do use these test results for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons. Just to remind you, the 3 through 8 tests have 4 performance levels, where level 3 and 4 are considered proficiency or above proficiency. So when I'm talking about proficiency levels, I'm talking level 3 and 4. So these were our results from the ELA and math, going from left to right in ELA grades 3 through 8, and then math grades 3 through 8. And that green row is the level 3 and 4 proficiency. So I'm adding up 3 plus 4 to get to the percent of students reaching proficiency in ELA and math at each grade level. I also provide the count of number of students tested at the top. I'll point out 2 things. I just want to emphasize, I have stars and notes on these slides, that this is the first administration of the 2-day test. The state changed the testing from 3 to 2 days in 2018, and that led to the resetting of the standards on this. So you'll also see a low number up here, 65 in math. I want to also point out a reminder down here is that since 2014, we no longer double test our students in 8th grade. So if students are accelerated in 8th grade and take the algebra regions, they're not taking the Math 8 test. And you'll see this come up a little bit, and I'll comment on how that influences our results a little bit later, that we're only testing our students in the 8th grade.
So there's still this, I guess this distinction, for whatever reason, between WAPIS and HCC. Certainly for ELA, and then to extent for math, although the math is kind of all over the place.
That seems a little all over the place. We'll look at some other graphs that will point this out, and we can talk about that. One way is looking here at comparing this to the state results. So the blue bars represent Byram Hill's proficiency rates, and the red lines represent the state proficiency. What I try to look here, the general rule of thumb I use is that Byram Hill should be close to double, maybe not always right at doubling what the state is, but close to it, and should follow the trend of the state. So you'll see here, so the state's going down from 3rd to 5th grade. You would expect we would go down, and that seems to be happening. You know, and then we shoot up here, and we seem to shoot up here. We shoot up at a higher rate than the state, which could lead to a little underperforming here, is how I look at it. So I'm looking, when I look at the bar difference here, it's maybe 4th, maybe a little bit in 3rd, where I see a narrower gap. Maybe that's normal, maybe not, I'm not sure yet, but if I see that year after year and see some higher rates here, it indicates that maybe we could be a little higher in ELA, sort of supporting your theory, Scott.
So but they haven't said like every year they're going to distribute the students the same.
Right.
They've made judgments every year based on.
Exactly, right. They don't do that. And then in math, you see that as well. We seem to buck the system a little bit in 5th grade, which is interesting to me. So the state trend is downward for the 3 years. We go down, but then up. So what I'm thinking here is I believe we're probably could be underperforming a little bit in 4th grade. That 4th grade is probably somewhere between 75 and 85 if we're going by the general trend of the state results and trying to double what the state results are. And then while it's flat from 5th to 6th, we jump way up here. And then what we see here in 8th grade, the 63 was our proficiency rate. What I do is say, well, we're really comparing apples and oranges here, so because this isn't all the students. So I added in the algebra students who took the test and look at their proficiency level. That would be 85%, which would then be in line with where 6th and 7th grade is when you look at all of our 8th grade students, regardless of which test they're taking.
Because it's a subset of kids that aren't in the advance.
Exactly.
That's a great way to look at that.
Yeah, so just trying to make sense of the story. If you just look at it one way, you're going to get skewed data, so I try to look at it
It's so
in
hard
different
to
ways.
do accurate analytics on this when they're changing the
They are, yeah. And so that's why I
year.
always do the caveat and I put the little message at the bottom about what's happening. So if I look back at previous years, I can remember the history of it. This is comparing year to year. Now again, I'm not so concerned that the comparison isn't meant to say that our instruction or our curriculum had any influence on kids doing better or worse, because we're not allowed, we can't make that comparison with the change in the test. What we can look for is, are we getting more students to reach proficiency and get them ready for high school? That's really my concern. And we see in ELA, comparing the 2 years, we have improvement in all areas except maybe 4th grade, but it's just a percentage point, so I'm not really sure if that's statistically comparable, valid. We do see a big jump in, the 6th grade here. We did have a low year in ELA. Now that was surprising. We talked about it last year. However, our ranking statewide and in Westchester was still really high. So I think it was a test that was just a harder designed test that produced lower scores across the board. That freaked out our teachers, but when I showed them the other data and said, look, you're still ranking where everyone else was, it made them feel better. And then math, similar changes. We had this big jump here in 3rd grade. I can't really explain it. We didn't start our new math program yet. We did nothing different in math, so I'm not sure. It's just,
Maybe that was an easy
we had some ups and downs, and you'll see that in a bar in a subsequent graph. So when we go to this is showing overall, just looking at the trend, we're trying to get more students reaching proficiency, less students that are below standards. This is looking at all of our students lumped together in 3 through 8 ELA in math, and looking at the trend from 2013 with the start of the Common Core test, and we have seen more and more students reaching proficiency. Can't always attribute it to what we're doing because the tests aren't always comparable. Just want to keep reminding us of that. Looking at our students with disabilities, again, the blue is Byram Hills and the red line is the state. I'm looking at about double, again, or more for our gap above the state. And we are seeing a little lower in 2018. Again, this is also a small population of students, so it could be lots of variability there. So I would look at more long-term trends than I would just snapshots, but I do like to look at this just to help me understand what might be happening.
Kids with IEPs?
Yes, yep, classified
Not
students.
504s,
Yes,
okay.
exactly. And what I do look is the trend. We went up from 2013 to 18 by 6 points, where the state went up 9. So we might have somewhat underperformed here in 2018, but it could be for various reasons. It could just be the population of that cohort of students.
And I don't know if you know this without looking, but do you know if the opt-out rate is higher in this group, or is it about the same?
Our opt-out rate, I did see a breakdown of this, of where the students performed in the previous year, and we actually had more students at levels 3 or 4 opt-out overall district-wide than we did 1s and 2s. So that was, they opted out this year, but what was their score the previous year?
Makes sense.
And that actually surprised me. I thought it would be flipped, but it wasn't. I think it was flipped initially in the first few years, and then it switched in recent years. Looking at math, similar thing here. I look for the trend line. Are we in the same trend, and are we about double? And we are, and well. What I find surprising is the ELA graph had a lower gap between state and Byram Hills, and ELA in 2018, but a larger one in math, and that was somewhat surprising. I don't know why. But again, we're exploring that. I did ask Kim and Peggy at the middle school and at Wampus to be thinking this year and over the next few years how we could really look at our special education program and making sure that our curriculum is aligned to the general education program. I think sometimes gaps could be due to the fact that the special education curriculum might not fully align. We might not be teaching the content at the same depth that we're teaching in general ed. And it's harder, it's more challenging, but we want to make sure that we're teaching what we should be teaching to the special education population as a first step, looking at the curriculum alignment. And again, that's how the state test should be used, for curriculum alignment. Are there gaps? That's one way we're using it. So we see we're about in line with the state growth from 2013 to 18. So we're in line, no surprises there. This is cohort. These would be the same students, so I'll explain this. Looking at the ELA, the left side, in 2017, this would be how the 3rd grade students performed, 63% reaching proficiency, and those same students in 4th grade, we had 68 reaching proficiency, so that's 5% more of that cohort reaching proficiency. So that's how to read these.
5 to 6 jump.
The 5 to 6 is surprising and remarkable. That's all I can say about it, except you'll see on a later slide that the 6th grade has been fairly consistent all the time. What I would say to that is probably we underperform at 5th grade. Is it underperforming, or is it just that kids, when they get to 6th grade, will start, we do identify those kids, we get them up to speed where they need to be, and they get to where they need to be going by middle school and into high school, which is the goal of the state tests. There's several ways we could look at that answer, and is, do we want to be really fully pushing the state tests and academics in 5th grade? I don't know. But again, remember, this is one snapshot, and what is the incentive for these students? What play is that happening on it? There could be multiple factors.
Well, not to over focus on your asterisk, but you get a 2-session test. I mean, comparing the 2 years when
Yes,
it's
exactly.
different.
These are completely different tests as well. So we're comparing apples to oranges in terms of the tests, and thanks for reminding us of that. And that's why I keep putting it on every slide. This also includes the algebra students, only because it wouldn't make sense if I didn't. It's comparing, again, I want to compare apples to apples, so students reaching proficiency. This is also cohort. Won't spend a lot of time unless you have questions. This is a hard graph to read, but we're looking at graduation year. That's what that number is. And then this would be their grade level. So this is the same students in 3rd grade going to 4th grade. And these are the years up here. So you're looking at 2017 and 18 for these students. So that's last year and the year before for kids in 3rd grade going to 4th grade. What I would look here for is over time an upward trend. You see some fluctuation, and that's going to be normal. It's the same group of students. Our goal is maybe we're going to get more students proficient as we progress through the 3 through 8 tests. And the same in math. You see some fluctuation. I won't overemphasize these because there's a lot of times where we can't really compare tests. This is looking at percentile ranking. So we're not looking at proficiency anymore. We're looking at where we rank compared to other schools in the state. I thought this could be something we actually could compare. Even if you're changing the test, at least everybody's getting the same different tests. So let's see how we're doing compared to other school districts. Where I'd expect us to be is 90 to 95th percentile. There's about 700 districts in New York State, and we should be up there in the top 30 in the state. 40 would put us in 95th percentile. So looking up here, you read that from red, green to blue is over time, 16, 17, 18. So the blue one is the current year. I'm going to work backwards here from ELA. You can see we're above 95th percentile in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in ELA. And we have been consistent in 6 and 7. You can see 8th grade has gone up a little bit there from a lower ranking. And the 3, 4th, and 5th grade, also we're maybe a little bit lower than where we want to be, but we're still pretty high when you compare us to statewide percentiles. Similar to math, a little fluctuation here in 4th grade is a little lower than where we would want it. 3rd grade had a big jump this year. That was that big jump we saw on a previous slide of 17-point proficiency higher, which put us up into about the 96th percentile, I believe, in the state. And the thing to point out about math is not all districts, and we'll see this more accentuated on the next graph, or in a future one, is that not all districts do accept the waiver where they will double test their students. So some districts in 8th grade will double test, so they'll have their accelerated kids still taking the Math 8 as well as the Algebra Regents. We don't do that.
They want their scores to look better.
So well, scores do look better. They do it for several different reasons, and we opted not to do that. I know other districts that have opted not to do it. It does cause some accountability problems in the high school. We will have a few accountability problems for a few years, but I think we can overcome that, and I think that trend's going to change with our new math pathways. Changing that.
What do you mean by accountability issues?
So you have to have, what happens if you have to have all your students taking a math assessment at high school. So what happens is, since we don't have students taking, every student has to be tested in 8th grade in mathematics, and that used to be the Math 8 assessment. We now have a waiver where we don't have to double test. So when we were double testing, that Algebra Regents got banked and used at the high school for accountability purposes.
Okay.
Since we're not double testing, that algebra exam in 8th grade has to be used for middle school accountability, because we have to test kids in 8th grade. It can't be used twice, so you can't use it in the high school. We no longer give any advanced math Regents exam. The geometry is proven not to be rigorous. The Algebra 2 we don't give. So we don't have a state test for math at the high school that's going to count toward accountability. Kids will graduate, it's not a graduation requirement, but for accountability. So that's where we're going to run into a problem for about 2 years, 3 years, until this new cohort of kids comes through from the middle school that I think is going to change it. So it's one of those problems that we're going to have for a while that I know is there. Is it going to have any impact on us? Not really. I might have to write a report or two to the state.
But that's better than all those kids taking double tests.
Yeah, we really weighed whether we want to double test kids in 8th grade, and
It would just be nice if they could have everybody using the same set of rules.
right, yeah. Well, the waivers allowed people to make that local decision, and that's sort of been our advantage, and we just didn't want to overtest the kids. And to have kids, what we used to have to do in the algebra curriculum then is sometimes stop algebra for a bit and go back and teach some of the Math 8 stuff that kids had sort of learned. It was just,
That's really like driving your curriculum decision then.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that was our decision. We want the best curriculum for our kids. Let's make that decision, and then we'll pay the consequences later. You can use other math tests for accountability. You can use AP exams, so AP Calc or AP Stats can count. So right now, when I look at the numbers of a couple cohorts of kids, we don't have enough numbers to get to 95% accountability. You need 95% participation rate, 95% of your population. I think by the time the current 8th grade students get to the upper grades, I think this cohort with the change in the math pathways will change that. If it doesn't, we'll have to address it. Oops. So this graph is interesting. So now I'm still looking at percentile rankings. How do we rank? But I'm looking at it in just more regionally in terms of Putnam, Westchester, and Rockland County. So this is about 55 districts on average. So what's happening here is looking at our percentile. We want to be probably at the 95th percentile or higher. So that would put us in the top 5 or 6 districts in this particular region. You see 6th grade has been extremely consistent in our ELA percentile rankings compared to other districts. For a few years when the Common Core just started, we had a little trouble in 7th grade. We couldn't explain what was happening. We were really confused, and we did some data analysis. I worked with Dwayne Smith and Dr. Powderly at the time. We would do our usual data analysis process, and we weren't seeing any results for 3 years. And then here in 2015, Dwayne Smith and I sat down and we said, okay, so our regular process isn't working, we need something else, let's look closer. So we started to look deeper at it. We started to really go to the standards with the teachers. Dwayne actually went and did some co-teaching lessons with middle school teachers, and then he brought in some of the strategies they use at the high school to the middle school, and then we're starting to see this jump up now.
Wow.
And we seem to be getting to where we need, and we've sort of cracked the nut on that.
Wow.
That was an appropriate way to use the state test. It was like,
That's
huh,
impressive.
something's not working in either our curriculum or instruction, what is it? And we don't have an exact answer because we used multiple strategies, but it was something to do with our alignment of not teaching the standards to the depth we needed to teach them.
It's interesting that it was just that great.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
Yeah.
And I would call up my friends in other districts saying, do you have really low test scores in ELA? No, we have it in 4th grade. Every district's got their grades where there's issues that they can't explain. Ours happened to be 7th grade ELA for a while. When you look at 8th grade math, we had high opt-out rates that I highlighted before here in 16 and 17, in ELA. And so I believe those high rates had an impact on the results here. Otherwise, this is about where we are in 8th grade ELA. You see lots of fluctuation in 3rd grade, and some steady there, not so much in 4th, and then 5th, also lots of fluctuation. Looking at cohort data, if you can sort of follow the bars from, for example, green to red to, no, that's wrong. From, say, I wanted to go green here in 3rd grade, be the same group of students as the red bar here, same as the blue bar here. That tells a little bit of a different story, a little more continuity there. We did have high opt-out rates here in that 3rd grade year. So again, we are identifying that we do have some curricular alignment issues to work on here at 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And similar in math, similar story, lots of consistency here in 6th and 7th grade. 8th grade is accentuated here. I pointed out, as I mentioned before, some districts double test in 8th grade. So we're not double testing, so we take our accelerated students, we pull them out of the mix. And some districts do that, some don't. Some have their accelerated kids in the mix. So we're sort of not comparing all like students in this particular group. So that started in 2014 with that red bar. That was the first year we stopped double testing. So I would guess we would be up here if we double tested our kids. And it's just a better curricular decision not to. And so that's the 3 through 8 ELA in math. Tells a story, but we have to look at it for what it's worth. Science in 4th and 5th grade have been fairly consistent. There's been a decline a little bit here. I think we've been putting more students into earth science over the years, and we don't double test in science, and that just might be the slight decline there, but we're still where we want to be in 4th grade and 8th grade science over time. And then I'll go to Regents. You've seen this data in June. They were unofficial data, but now I can show you that. One note is we'll be administering the new Global History Transition Exam, which will lead to the new Global History exam in 2 years. So that's coming up. I'll keep you posted on that one.
So that's in 9th grade?
What they're doing, Global History is in
10th
10th, but they're going to now separate what they're doing is separating out the time period. So the 10th grade students will only be tested on 10th grade material. They used to be tested on 9th and 10th grade.
Okay.
And they're changing that during the transition. The Common Core assessments in math and ELA are on a 5-level performance level rating, which is different than the 3 through 8. In English, we're in our 3rd administration, still doing extremely well. You can see in 2007, our ranking was number 3 in New York State and 1 in Westchester for student scoring performance levels 4 and 5. The rankings haven't come out yet for 2018.
And this is what grade usually?
This is 11th grade.
11th grade.
These are our 11th grade students. So we're doing right where we want to be. This was our first year of the administration, which was well above what our expectations were, and we've been fairly consistent. Slight drop here, that could be the test. I'll know a little bit later when I can look at rankings.
All that work we did to move the regents to 10th grade so that these kids
Yes.
in junior year don't have to be overloaded.
And then the Common
There's
Core
the
changed it
Common
all.
Core regents, thank you.
Yeah, so it changed it. So we did move it to 10th and then back to 11th with Common Core.
So
Because
is
it was
that group double tested, the 10th and 11th graders?
No, we don't do the regents in 10th grade anymore.
No.
But I'm saying when it's switched.
No, we just were trying to lower the load in 11th grade because 11th grade is the hard year for students.
All their APs and SAT 2s and...
In college and getting ready for those things. There's a lot of pressure on the 11th grade. You can see here our average, even though this percentage went down, our average is still fairly high. So I just wanted to point that out, that I have a feeling we're still where we want to be in English. Algebra. Also, this is our 5th administration of the Common Core Algebra. Our results are pretty extraordinary. This shows it over time. That's a ranking. This shows it over time. What I think is interesting here, this was the first administration of the Common Core Regents. So passing is the blue bar, the mastery, the very high level, performance level 5. You can see our change of 61 percentage points over those 5 years. So I think we were still exploring what the state expectation was in terms of the higher level thinking, and our instruction wasn't quite, or our curriculum wasn't quite aligned. And now I feel like we're finding our sweet spot here. This is probably where we're going to be in the mid-70s, which still puts us, last year we were ranked number 5 in Westchester on the algebra region. So I think we're finding where we want to be on that assessment. These assessments haven't changed for a decade. Our passing rates and our averages have been about the same, fairly consistent in all of these. I'd like to point out every year, it's usually a question that the public may ask, is that the percentages here on the level, the mastery and the 65 to 84 seem lower than the other regents. So 2 points about that. First, the chemistry is an advanced regent, so it is a harder regent. We would expect there to be more of a spread at the top. And second, we don't do a non-regents chemistry class, and most of our students in 11th grade, 10th or 11th grade, take chemistry. So some districts will give a non-regent, so they'll have a lot of their population will be taking chemistry, but not a regents. We make those kids all take the regents. So we have a lot of students, most of our students will end up taking one of the most difficult exams, regents exams we offer. So it's the spread that we expect. It's still a really high average rating for chemistry. These have not changed. We'll be starting the new global history transition exam, so I'll give more detailed information on that next year. And so some highlights of the ranking. I'm just pointing out that 5th and 3rd grade are entering single-digit rankings, first time in a while, so hopefully this is a trend. We'll know in a few more years if it's a trend or not. But I wanted to point that out in the efforts of trying to do some work. We did do some work in ELA for a few years at Wampus, and maybe we're feeling some effect of that. But again, the tests are different, so I can't make that conclusion.
It's exciting to see some of those scores, like 7th grade.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And they've been really consistent. We always rank in the top 5 in those grades all the time, pretty consistently. So it shows that we have a strong alignment in our curriculum and instruction, and it's been consistent for years. Let me finish with priorities. So based on the data, and again, not just the state data, but multiple data sources, English language arts, we're looking at getting some benchmark literacy intervention strategies so that we're using common strategies K-5, so that we can make sure we're looking at benchmarks so we can compare kids to kids, not just on state tests, but some other types of testing. And we're using a leveled literacy intervention program we're piloting in grade 4 so that we can see if that's valuable to you, so we can make sure we're getting kids the reading and writing skills they need to be successful when they get to the middle school. And Peggy's going to start a curriculum committee at Wampus, which is a way to make sure that teachers are focused on the priority curriculum events, and that we're trying to just make sure we get the math and ELA scores where we want them before we start going down the roads of other initiatives. And she wants to involve teachers in those conversations as well. And we'll be looking at our AIS, our academic intervention services, and response to intervention practices, and aligning those across the district. Jill Boynton and I will be reviewing our AIS plan, and I'll be presenting that to you by the end of the year. In mathematics, we're in our second year of the new math program investigations, now going into 2nd through 4th grade. We're still continuing professional development in K and 1. And we're also looking at a math intervention tool so we can identify kids who are, when I say intervention, what I'm saying is looking at a tool that will assess the gaps that kids have in the curriculum, and then we can provide a program to get them up to speed by the following year. So that's the program in both ELA and math that we're looking at, and we're piloting that in 2nd and 3rd grade this year. And we'll continue looking at our middle school math pathways curriculum, and I'll give some more updates to you this year as we're in the 2nd year of that, and continuing training our teachers at the high school. In science, we'll be starting to look at the K-5 science standards in the next few years to align to the new science standards and evaluating our STEAM courses. In my packet, I shared with you the enrollment in those courses as we're in this 2nd or 3rd year of some of those, and we continue to have really high enrollment in those STEAM classes. And we'll be evaluating those programs. We continue to focus on historical thinking as opposed to just the acquisition of knowledge in social studies. And we're in year 2 of our Global Scholars Program, and those numbers are also in your packet, and they're really phenomenal. Lots of interest in this, and you'll be meeting those students in, I believe, February or March when we have a curriculum conversation. We'll bring back some kids from last year to see how year 2 is going. So that should be fun. In world languages, we're looking at our assessments and evaluating our assessment practices in the world language program. And that's all I have, unless you want more information. We can talk more.
I think that girl on the right is
Yeah, the girl on the right, she is really exceptional, and thus made my assessment report. Look at that child grow up.
In a future meeting, will you review the pathways, how it's working at the school, and what you're seeing towards trends towards the acceleration?
Will I be?
Will you be presenting more about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we continue to evaluate the program. We'll take a look at how well students are performing. Continuing both in 7th and then 8th grade, we're following those 8th grade students this year, or the first cohort to be in the honors algebra in 8th grade. We'll follow those carefully.
Thank you, Tim. You
Thank
always
you.
make
That was
it-
really comprehensive.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
and you
Yeah.
always
It's a late
make
night.
it so easy for us to understand. Like the way you presented, it's really excellent.
Thank you.
so much.
Yeah, we want to make sense of the numbers because
Yeah.
it doesn't have meaning, and I just present a lot of garbage in, garbage out. I was a computer programmer. Oops.
Very thorough.
There we go.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Tim.
Staff reports.
On to staff reports. We've heard a lot tonight, but I do want to have some student highlights. First of all, from our science research group, we knew that last year Jackson Deidelsweig and Julia Zaborowski were national merit semifinalists for science research, but we just found out that Julia is a finalist.
Wow.
So that is really fantastic. I also wanted to congratulate the students who were inducted into the Tri-M Music Honor Society last week. I was also inducted as an honorary member.
Congratulations.
My first Byram Hills induction, I said, ironically, I cannot play an instrument or sing, but I support our music programs, and I was very happy to do that. And the last thing I'd like to note is our homecoming week. We had incredible homecoming games, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. Our varsity teams played under the lights. This is something new for Byram Hills, has not been done ever in our 50 years. And I would like to really commend the students who I thought showed amazing sportsmanship, and was happy to see all the community members who came out to cheer our kids on. It was truly a student event, and I was really proud of that. I also would like to say that there were a lot of other community events, and this is something a year ago, remember when we had the eclipse, and I saw a couple hundred people at Byram Hills that afternoon, and I was so moved by that and thought, that's what we need to do. We need to have more community events here. So having that week for homecoming, and we'll do that week again in the spring, was really special for us. Also, thanks to the Harlem Wizards, thanks to the BHEF, we had the Harlem Wizards, and we also had a movie night at Wampus where they rented a big screen and invited the community to come and watch, I think it was Captain Underpants. Yeah, that was a good one. A thriller. To have events such as that really is exactly what we want in this Byram Hills community. So I was appreciative to be at those events and to see our players play. We have some upcoming World Languages Honor Society induction is tomorrow night. We also have a PTSA Working Parents Committee. Tim and I will be hosting somewhere. I think we have about 20 people coming already. And we will be meeting at Crittenden to talk about some district initiatives. It's great for working parents. I've also heard from working parents, they feel very networked to the community through our principals' coffees, which are now online. They're very happy about that. And then we have the cum laude induction at the end of October. Also, other community events that we have had, the Armonk Outdoor Art Show, which I think is an opportunity. Many of the people, the graduating class from 50 years ago came in, they were part of the art show, they were part of our homecoming events. So as much as we can do that in this community, I encourage us to keep doing that within our limits. Of course, there's always the within our limits. The 1 week of Byram Hills homecoming did not come without a tremendous cost. And the cost is not in the lights, the cost is in the personnel that we need to actually manage those events. It was very costly. I do believe that for that week it was worth it, and I'm grateful that we were able to provide that. And we do plan to have a discussion about it in the spring to see if we would like to do this again for next year.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other reports from?
Let me just remind the board that in your packet I put the administrative goals. At the next board meeting, our administrators will join us for a discussion around administrative goals. I'd like to give it to you in advance. It's a big document of 40 pages, so you have plenty of time, but I'll submit it in your next packet as well.
To read the novel.
Thank you. It's exciting.
I just wanted to mention in the informational items, last October I talked to the board about bringing in school aid specialists to look at do a state aid review. Susan spent a lot of time working with them, and they did find about $197,000 in filings that the district hadn't done over a couple of years. So we haven't paid them anything yet. We expect to get the funds in March of 2019. When we do, that's when we pay them. So it was worth our while bringing them in.
What percentage did they get again? Approximately?
Oh, what percentage
What
did the firm get?
percentage do they get?
They get 15%.
15? Yeah.
It's about
Yeah.
money, about money.
Excellent.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's
Thank
great.
you for, thank you for bringing it to us.
That worked out.
And Jim and Susan were keeping me abreast of what was not recorded correctly, like why would we have that in the first place? It's nice to have that, oh, isn't this great, but the problem exists that it wasn't recorded correctly the first time. And we understand how that happened, specific areas, transportation, special education, but things that we didn't actually know, we could record. So it gave us some view for how to do it right for the future.
Yeah, it could mean that more money going forward, actually.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't have to pay someone to recover.
Exactly.
Do it ourselves. Maybe they can find something else.
Yeah.
Educational.
Thank you, Jim and Susan.
So my only 30-second board report is that we talked a little bit about school start times in the School Board Association as to whether or not they were going to look into it this year. And there was a board meeting that we had at the Westchester Putnam School Board Association, and that is something that is on the agenda. So I think the good news is that during the course of this year, hopefully there will be some programming and/or information coming out that just might be a piece of the puzzle as we analyze it. I'm not quite sure when, but at some point this school year, so that's good news.
Are there any, I mean, there are a number of different studies on pros and cons in and around that. I mean, is there any like regional expert in this area, or?
About school start times?
Yeah.
Well, like the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that it's sometime around 8:30. That's when kids should be starting their school day.
There's a consensus on that. The question is how do you do
How do you
it
do
in
it?
a cost-effective manner and
Can
deal with
you-
athletics, and
Traffic and
that's what I
busing.
think they're going to coalesce around, just trying to do
Trying
some
to figure it
surveying
out.
and, yeah.
Yeah, because I think we all realize that kids are starting school too early.
We all should be getting 8 hours of sleep every night.
We should. We should.
Not
Attend their meetings.
We're about a half an hour.
I'm an hour and a half past my bedtime.
Who's on deck for the BHF meeting tomorrow?
Good question.
Who's going to
Is that the one that we switched?
I'm
I
in
thought that we
November.
switched for November.
I
You're
already-
November?
I feel like I'm
I already
November.
did the
this
one.
summer. I'm not
You
this
did
month.
mine. I thought that you were November.
I don't remember when it was, I took out the calendar. What's
That's
that
me tomorrow.
typical?
Yeah, the Education Foundation meets tomorrow night.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I thought I had switched for November, but
I didn't even see a list. Was there a list?
It was
There
on
is a
the
list.
The first, one on the list that gave all our committee assignments had it on the bottom.
You do tomorrow night.
I can't turn my computer off.
Well, if whoever
We'll
is
figure
on
it
the
out,
list, just in
and
case
if-
they can't
yes.
go, just email around and hopefully someone will be able to go. Otherwise, you'll be there, but hopefully one of us.
We can find that list.
That first list?
I know it was in the agenda, like two
was?
meetings
It was
ago.
in the committee assignments, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that's where it was. And I'm sure Eugene will definitely have it. Anybody else have any reports? All right, so moving to communications, there were 3. There was one regarding charitable funds, there was one regarding varsity athletics, and there was one regarding the vetting process that we talked about tonight. With that, I would ask for a motion to approve the board minutes from September 17th, 2018.
Second.
Any comments, changes, edits? All in favor? And then a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Good night.
Back here.